The waitress sat across from me now, her expression unreadable. Her voice had gone quiet, as if she didn't want anyone else to hear what she was about to say. She looked toward the window, then back at me. What she said next chilled me in a way that even the truck had not. She told me I wasn't the first. Several drivers, all within the last few months, had stopped in the same diner, saying the same thing. Always in the middle of the night, always on that same stretch of road. A truck that followed too closely, sometimes for miles, sometimes for hours. No driver ever seen. No plate, no logo, just lights. And when the drivers finally stopped to confront it, or when they pulled over, it simply vanished. No one ever saw it leave. Some of them never made it home. The details were always similar. An abandoned car found later, the engine still running, a phone on the seat, footprints sometimes leading a short way from the vehicle. But they always stopped. No sign of the person who left them. Not a single one found. She didn't sound like she was trying to scare me. She sounded tired. Like this was a truth she'd accepted long ago. Something she didn't talk about unless she had to. I could see something heavy in her eyes. The weight of knowledge, the kind that clings to a person. My coffee had gone cold in my hands, but I didn't notice. The image of the truck filled my head again. That unnatural closeness. The way it moved like it wasn't being driven at all. More like it was watching, tracking. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been chosen somehow. I asked her why it didn't do anything to me. Why it followed but never struck. Why it disappeared when I pulled over. Her answer didn't help. Maybe, she said, it was just learning. That thought stayed with me long after I left the diner. The way a hunter studies prey. Testing reactions. Seeing what I would do. Preparing for something later. I drove the rest of the way home in daylight, sticking to more crowded highways when I could. But the image of that truck never left my mind. Every large vehicle in the distance made my pulse jump. Every shadow under an overpass looked like something waiting. When I finally got home, I didn't feel safe. I kept checking my windows, checking the street. For days afterward, I felt watched. I told myself it was in my head, that I was overtired, that the unease didn't fade. I started digging, looking online for stories, reports, anything. I found more than I wanted to. Scattered across different forums and news articles were stories that matched mine too closely to ignore. Different states, different roads, always in the dead of night. Always a truck that appeared out of nowhere. Always too close, and always eventually gone. Some described lights that didn't reflect like normal. Others said the truck seemed to distort space around it, bending the air. A few described dreams that followed, intense nightmares of engines and headlights that never stopped chasing them. Then one night, a few weeks later, I saw the news. A car had been found on the same highway where I had driven that night. Empty. Engine still running. Driver missing. The report was brief. No known cause. No foul play suspected. But a witness had seen a large truck idling just down the road moments before the car was discovered. I stared at the television, heart pounding again. I knew then that I hadn't imagined any of it. It was real. Whatever that truck was, it had returned. Or maybe it never left, and I had simply been one of the lucky ones. For now, in the weeks that followed, I stopped driving at night altogether. I kept my phone charged. I shared my location when I traveled. But still, when I'm out late and I see headlights behind me, my breath catches. Every long highway now feels like a trap. Because now I understand something I didn't that night. Not all hauntings happen in houses. Not all ghosts are people. Some wear metal and glass. Some hunt the open road. And sometimes, when the highway's quiet and the night is deep enough, something else drives behind you. Something that does not care about logic or safety. Something that watches, learns, and waits. I made it home once, but I don't know if I'll get that lucky again, and I don't know if the next person will. When the shovel struck something solid, the jolt ran through my arms and into my spine. I stopped digging and leaned on the handle, wiping the sweat off my face with a dirty sleeve. The sun was dipping low over the trees, casting long orange shadows over the field. I had expected nothing but more clay and rock. This well project was supposed to take at least another week, but something metallic had stopped my progress. Jake, my son, was in the hole with me a few feet away. He had been quiet most of the day, focused on digging, his teenage energy pushing the work along faster than I could keep up. We were nearly 10 feet down now. When I called up for the flashlight, he scrambled out of the hole and came back with it in a minute. He handed it down, and I clicked it on. The metal reflected back immediately. Whatever we had hit, it wasn't just a pipe or a piece of rusted equipment. It was flat, rectangular, edges too clean to be natural. I crouched beside it and brushed away the surrounding dirt with my fingers. The soil clung to my hands, damp and cold, but I kept going. Eventually, a corner became visible, then more. By the time I could see the shape clearly, I realized we had uncovered a metal container about the size of a small suitcase. It looked old, very old. The surface was weathered and rough, like it had been underground for decades. I knocked on it gently. It didn't sound hollow, not completely. My first thought was that it might be junk, maybe some farmer's storage chest tossed into a pit and forgotten. But part of me knew better. Something about the way it had been buried, the way it was wedged deep in undisturbed ground, didn't feel accidental. We spent another hour digging it out, careful not to scratch or damage it. By the time we hauled it up to the surface, the light was nearly gone, and the field was silent except for the wind moving through the grass. We carried it to the barn and set it under the floodlights near the workbench. In the bright light, it looked even older. There were marks on the side, maybe once writing, but now almost completely erased by time and corrosion. I checked for hinges or latches, but couldn't find any. Eventually, I used a crowbar, slowly prying at the edge until something cracked. The top gave way with a groan, and inside was a pile of old documents and a musty smell that made me step back. I started pulling items out slowly, trying not to damage anything. The papers were thin, yellowed, and folded tight. Underneath them were photographs, dozens of them. They all featured the same young woman, early 20s maybe, long dark hair, soft eyes. She smiled in some of them. In others, she stood still, her expression unreadable. The clothes and colors told me these pictures were from the 60s, maybe earlier. On the back of the first photo, in faded ink, was a name, Sarah Milligan, 1964. That name felt familiar, though I couldn't place it right away. I kept digging through the box. More photos, letters, newspaper clippings. A small leather-bound journal tucked between old envelopes. I flipped through the journal, careful not to tear any pages. The entries were dated over the course of several months, written in neat cursive. As I reached the back, a folded newspaper clipping fell into my lap. The headline stopped me cold. Local woman still missing after 3 months. The article described the missing person's case from the same year as the photographs. Sarah Milligan had disappeared from a rural farm in the area. Search efforts had failed. No trace had ever been found. Her father had been questioned, but was never charged. There wasn't enough evidence. I sat there for a long time, staring at that clipping, my thoughts racing. I had never heard the full story before, but now, the name Milligan finally clicked. My uncle, James Milligan. He was the one who left me this property after the divorce. He had died 6 months earlier. I had inherited the land and the old farmhouse without knowing much about him. Just that he'd lived alone for most of his life. Quiet man. Kept to himself. And now here I was, sitting on the floor of his barn, holding a box that looked like evidence from a decades-old crime. We didn't sleep much that night. I gathered the items back into the box as best I could. In the morning, I called the sheriff's office and told them what we had found. They sent out 2 deputies first, then detectives, then a whole team. For the next few days, the farm was swarming with uniforms. They interviewed me and my son separately. They took photographs, bagged everything. They asked questions over and over. When had I discovered it? Had I opened it alone? Had I known the name Sarah Milligan before? I answered as honestly as I could. Eventually, they confirmed the DNA and the old items matched the missing woman. The case had been officially reopened. But nothing prepared me for what came next. Detective Reeves was the one assigned to the case. She showed up a few days after the box had been taken into evidence. Her expression was sharp, and her questions were direct. She sat at my kitchen table with a notebook open in front of her, glancing between my face and her notes. She told me the name on the photos, Sarah Milligan, had been officially confirmed. The journal entries, letters, even strands of hair found inside the envelope had matched preserved evidence from the old investigation. This was no longer a mystery. It was being treated as a homicide. Then she asked if I had ever heard the name James Milligan before inheriting the farm. I told her the truth. He was my mother's uncle. I never met him. He had been distant from the family, and I had never visited the property until after he passed. I had no reason to believe there was anything strange about the place until we started working on it. She seemed to believe me, but her expression remained unreadable. "You're his next of kin," she said. "That complicates things." By the end of the week, the property was classified as an active crime scene. We were told to leave. Jake and I packed bags and checked into a small motel in town. From the parking lot, I could still see the shape of our barn behind the hills, the roofline visible between the trees. Crime scene tape had gone up across the driveway. News vans had started showing up. Locals whispered in gas stations and grocery stores. The discovery had become a story. But for me and Jake, it wasn't just a story. It was personal. We had uncovered something meant to stay buried. While the police searched the property, I spent my time at the local library, looking into the original investigation. There wasn't much. The papers from that year were vague, and details were sparse. But I found enough to piece together a basic picture. Sarah Milligan had been 23 when she vanished. She had lived on this farm with her father, James. They said she had been planning to leave soon, to marry a man from town. She never made it to the wedding. James had told police she went into town and never returned. But nobody in town saw her that day. The man she was supposed to marry reported her missing the next morning. The police searched the property back then. Dogs, volunteers, helicopters. But they never found her. Nothing. Not a trace. Until now, reading the old articles, something clicked in my memory. My mother had once mentioned a cousin who disappeared before I was born. I never asked about it again. I assumed it was one of those family tragedies that got folded into silence. But now it felt like that silence had weight, like the whole property carried it. After almost 2 months of police activity, we were allowed back in. They had not found a body, just the evidence from the container. Without a confession or a witness, they said, the case would remain open but cold. There wasn't enough to charge anyone. James Milligan had taken whatever he knew to the grave. The farm felt different. Still, heavy. The barn smelled the same, but I avoided that back corner. The well we had been digging was never finished. I fenced it off, left the dirt piles where they were. Something about continuing that project felt wrong. Jake was quiet after we returned. He didn't talk much about the discovery. He stopped asking questions about the past. At night, I would catch him looking toward the barn, eyes unsettled. I told him the truth, as much as he could understand, that the police believed Sarah Milligan had lived and died on this property. that someone likely knew what happened and had hidden it for decades, that we might never know more than that. He nodded. He understood enough. As for me, I began to notice things I hadn't before. The way the air shifted in the hallway at night. The sound of floorboards settling when the house was still. The fields felt too wide sometimes, like someone could be watching from anywhere. And even though I tried to focus on work, to fix the fences and clear the brush, I could not shake the feeling that Sarah's story had not ended. I went back to the journal. The handwriting changed over time, becoming more frantic, more uncertain. There were mentions of arguments, of being trapped, of wanting to leave. The last entry didn't mention fear directly, but between the lines, it was there. I know he won't let me go. She had written that weeks before she disappeared. I don't know what happened in that house 60 years ago. I don't know what pushed James Milligan to bury a box full of memories in the ground. But I believe Sarah was trying to leave, and someone made sure she never did. Now her memory lives on the property. Her name, once forgotten, is carved into the air. And every morning when I walk the field, I find myself looking toward the barn, wondering if she's still waiting for someone to find the rest of her story. Maybe we never will. But that box should never have been buried. And whatever secrets remain, they are no longer hidden. Not completely. The silence that once protected them has been broken. And that, I think, is how the truth begins. Not with answers, but with cracks in the ground where the truth can breathe again. At first, it was just a car. A blue sedan with tinted windows and a forgettable look. The kind of vehicle you wouldn't think about twice on a normal day. But it didn't take long before that car turned our road trip into something else entirely. Something that still keeps me up at night, wondering how close we came to disappearing. Emily and I had planned the trip for weeks. A cross-country drive from New York to California. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a break from stress, a chance to reconnect after a difficult year. We planned quirky stops, small towns, scenic detours. The first couple of days went just how we hoped. Long drives, good playlists, shared silences that felt comfortable. But everything changed just outside of Chicago. We were stopped at a gas station, middle of the afternoon. I was topping off the tank while Emily went inside for drinks. That's when I saw the sedan for the first time. It pulled up across from us, same side of the pump island. Nothing strange about that. Just a car filling up. But the next time we saw it, things felt different. 2 hours later, we stopped for lunch at a roadside diner. Nothing around for miles. I parked the car in one of the few open spots near the entrance. As we walked toward the door, I noticed it again. Same blue sedan, same dark windows. Parked just a few spots down. I pointed it out to Emily. She glanced, then shrugged. She said it was probably a coincidence. A common car. Same color as half the rentals on the road. But the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. By the time we checked into a motel that evening, I was no longer brushing it off. As we pulled into the lot, headlights came in behind us, then faded into another parking space as we got our room key. I knew before I even turned my head. Same car, same windows. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the thin motel curtains of the lot. The sedan was there, unmoving. The engine off. Lights gone. Just sitting. I couldn't see inside. It was too dark. The tint was too deep. That night, neither of us slept much. We took turns glancing through the window. The car never moved. When morning came, it was gone. For a few hours, we convinced ourselves it was just a traveler on the same route. Same highway, same stops. The roads only offer so many options when crossing the country. But around noon, the doubt came rushing back. We had just merged onto the highway when I saw it again. A few cars behind us. Same shape. Same windows. Same exact shade of blue. I checked the mirror so many times my eyes started to burn. Sometimes it drifted out of view. Sometimes I lost it around curves or behind trucks. But then it would return. Always at the edge of vision. Never too close. Never far. I took an exit at random. Small town. One gas station and a diner. We pulled off and waited. 5 minutes passed. Then, nothing. Then, just as I started to relax, the car rolled past the intersection. It didn't stop. Just coasted through town like it had no interest in us. But it was the same car. I could feel Emily tense in the seat beside me. I didn't need to say anything. We drove again, avoiding highways, taking winding back roads and alternate routes that didn't show up on phone apps. Still, the car returned. Always distant. Always behind us. Never enough to prove anything. But enough to know we weren't imagining it. It was watching, waiting. The sun dipped low again. We reached a dusty stretch of road with nothing on either side but endless fields. No homes, no lights. The road narrowed into a 2-lane ribbon. That's when things changed. Ahead, we saw a barn. Faded red, roof partially collapsed. Just off the road. Parked beside it, nearly out of sight, was the blue sedan. Waiting. I hit the brakes hard. The tires skidded slightly on the gravel shoulder. I turned the wheel, ready to spin the car around, but the road behind us was already blocked. Another car, larger, older, positioned just right to cut off our escape. We were trapped. The road was silent. The fields were still. My hands clenched the steering wheel, the weight of the situation settling in all at once. The blue sedan waited ahead. The second car behind us stood motionless. There were no signs of life, no lights, no people. Just two vehicles boxing us in, like the end of a corridor with no way out. Then the door of the sedan opened. A man stepped out, slowly. He didn't rush or hide. He moved with a strange calm, like he was already in control. Even from a distance, I knew who it was. The face was unmistakable. I hadn't seen him in months, but time hadn't changed the shape of his jaw, or the way he walked like he owned the road. It was Emily's ex, Mark. I remembered him too well. The protective look in Emily's eyes when she talked about him. The bruises she tried to hide. The fear that never completely left her even after he was gone. The restraining order had been granted, but it never felt like it was enough. And now here he was, out in the middle of nowhere, waiting for us. He approached our car with that same familiar smile, the one that never reached his eyes. I hit the lock button even though it was already down. He stopped just short of the driver's side window, leaned in, and looked at both of us. Then, he said something slow and clear, though I couldn't hear it through the glass. Emily sat frozen, her breathing shallow. I could feel her shaking. Behind us, the second vehicle remained still, but I knew there was someone inside. Watching, ready. I glanced around, mind racing. There was no help. No buildings nearby. No lights. No signs. The nearest town was probably 20 miles behind us. We were on our own. I whispered to Emily to get down. She didn't move at first. But then, as Mark turned slightly to glance at the road behind us, she dropped below the dashboard. I threw the car into reverse. I didn't look back. I just hit the gas. The tires kicked up gravel as we sped backward. The vehicle behind us jerked into motion, trying to block us. But I swerved hard and barely squeezed around it, brushing against the edge of a ditch as we skidded onto the grass. The car bounced and groaned, but it held together. I shifted into drive and punched it. Dust filled the rearview mirror. I didn't stop to check if they were following. I knew they would. We took random turns. Country roads, back lanes, dirt paths. For the next 2 hours, we drove without direction, cutting across farmland and through small towns, never stopping. Every car in the mirror felt like a threat. Every pair of headlights felt familiar. Eventually, We found a motel far off our original route. I paid cash. We parked the car behind the building and covered it with a tarp we found in the maintenance shed. Inside the room, we sat on the edge of the bed, still in our jackets, too wired to sleep. Emily kept glancing toward the window, even though the blinds were shut. She didn't say much. Neither did I, but we both knew what this meant. Mark had followed us halfway across the country. He knew our route, our plans, our habits. He had someone helping him. And now, he knew how to find us. Going home wasn't an option. Every address we had ever used was now compromised. Every contact, every routine. He could reach all of it. The next morning, I made a decision. We left our phones behind. We used cash for everything. We found a thrift store and bought new clothes. Nothing that stood out. We drove to a different state, picked a new name to check into motels. We kept moving. The road trip had ended. We weren't travelers anymore. We were in hiding. In time, the days began to blur. The constant fear dulled but never disappeared. Some nights, I still scanned the parking lot for that same blue sedan. Sometimes, I thought I saw it. Sometimes, I was sure it was just my mind. But I never stopped checking. I never stopped looking over my shoulder. We talked about starting over, somewhere far away. A new city, a new life. Somewhere with fewer memories, fewer roads to trace us. I didn't know if it would work. I still don't, but it was better than waiting. We never told anyone where we were going. We just left. The only thing we kept was each other. That was the one thing they hadn't taken. We don't talk about the road much, about that trip, about this sedan. But I know it's still out there, somewhere. And I know he might be too. Every empty highway makes me wonder. Every small town diner, every gas station off the interstate. The road still stretches ahead of us. And somewhere behind, I know, that car is still waiting. The last time I saw Eliza Thompson, she was laughing. It was early morning, just after sunrise, and the sky over the ocean was a swirl of pink and orange. We stood on deck 16, leaning on the railing, the sea stretching out forever in every direction. Eliza had just finished a long night shift at the reception desk, and I had been on patrol since before dawn. She had invited me to join her for a few minutes of peace before heading to bed. I worked security on the Emerald Princess, a luxury cruise ship that sailed back and forth through the Caribbean. It was my third year on board. I knew the decks better than most passengers knew their neighborhoods. I knew the sounds, the lights, the schedules. I had seen everything from stolen wallets to drunken fights to arguments that nearly turned into lawsuits. But I had never seen anything like what happened after that sunrise. Eliza was one of the receptionists. Smart, warm, professional. We weren't close, but we had shared meals in the crew mess, traded jokes in the halls, and kept each other company during slow hours. That morning, she looked tired but content. She said she would go straight to her cabin and sleep. Then she walked away, her hair catching the light as she disappeared down the stairs. That was the last time anyone saw her. I didn't think much of it at first. The day went on like any other. I finished my rounds, checked cameras, wrote reports. Later that evening, during our crew meeting, her absence was the first warning. She was late. She had never been late before. Her supervisor asked if anyone had seen her. I said I had, early morning, heading to her room. That was the last time anyone could confirm where she was. We knocked on her door. No answer. I used my master key. The cabin was empty. The bed was still made. Her uniform for the evening shift was laid out on the chair. Her phone was still on the charger. Her shoes by the bed. Her journal, half full, sat on the nightstand. There were no signs of a struggle. No note. Nothing disturbed. We checked the cameras. At 7:12 in the morning, she entered her cabin. After that, nothing. No exit. No movement in the corridor. No shadow under the door. She never came out. The hallway camera worked. I reviewed the footage myself. Dozens of other crew members passed by that day. The system was functioning, but not once did that door open again. Security protocol kicked in. We searched the ship, top to bottom. Public areas, restricted rooms, mechanical spaces. Every lifeboat, every crew deck. Nothing. The captain made a quiet announcement to the senior staff. Missing person. Non-criminal for now. The Coast Guard was alerted, but we were too far out for a quick response. We kept sailing. Passengers started noticing the extra patrols, the tension. Some whispered, some speculated. The story spread faster than we could contain it. I kept thinking back to that morning, her voice, her smile, the way she said she was going to sleep. I had no reason to question her then. Now I wondered if there was something in her voice I had missed. Something subtle. Some sign. The next day, investigators from the cruise line arrived by helicopter. They brought more staff, specialists. They scanned her cabin for prints, ran background checks, questioned every crew member. They reviewed every second of security footage from every camera in the area. Nothing. Eliza Thompson had walked into her room and disappeared. No one ever found out how. The search didn't stop after the first day. For the next week, every hallway was double-checked. Rooms were searched with permission. Passenger logs were reviewed. Eliza's social media, phone records, even her most recent conversations were picked apart by people trained to see what the rest of us couldn't. They found nothing unusual. No signs of depression. No romantic complications. No fights. No complaints. No missed warnings. She was stable. She was liked. She had just signed on for another 3-month contract. Her cabin remained sealed. I passed it often during my patrols. The hallway outside looked like any other. A fire extinguisher on the wall. Emergency lighting overhead. Crew cabins lining both sides. But when I walked past her door, I always slowed down. There was something strange about the silence there. Not just quiet. Hollow. Passengers whispered. Some said she jumped. Some said she ran away. Some said she had never been on the ship at all. The rumors came from everywhere. Staff tried to control the story, but it was impossible. People knew someone was missing, and the fact that no one could explain how or why made it worse. The most common theory was that she had gone overboard, but cameras on the outside decks didn't support that. The lifeboat sensors hadn't tripped. No alarms, and someone jumping would have been seen. It was a calm morning. Clear skies. Good visibility. People were out early on the upper levels. No one saw anything. I kept going back to that footage. Her entering the cabin. The door closing. Then nothing. No shadow. No sound. No exit. I tried to think like an investigator. I checked ventilation access. There were none in that cabin big enough for someone to climb through. The floor and ceiling were sealed. No crawl spaces. The only way in or out was the door. And that door never opened again. Eventually, the ship completed its route and returned to port. More authorities got involved. A second investigation started. The cabin was dismantled. Walls opened. Space measured. Everything confirmed. Nothing hidden. Nothing removed. She had still vanished. Her family arrived. Her mother, her brother. I saw them waiting outside the security office one morning, sitting with blank expressions. They didn't cry. Not in public. Just waited. I heard her mother collapse in one of the interview rooms when they showed her the footage. They flew back a few days later. No answers. No closure. A new receptionist was assigned to the desk. Another crew member moved into Eliza's cabin. The hallway lost its silence. The ship continued its routes. Nothing stopped. But for me, everything had changed. I kept working, but my patrols were different now. I no longer trusted what I saw. I started checking doors twice. making notes of things that didn't feel right. I walked slower through certain areas. I reviewed old footage, trying to see if there were other missing gaps. I didn't find any. Still, I watched. One night, just after midnight, I stood on deck 16 where I had last seen her. The water below was endless, a dark field of moving black. No shore, no buildings, just the deep. I thought about how small we really were. A ship in the middle of that much water. A person in the middle of that much unknown. I don't believe in the paranormal. I don't believe in ghosts, but something happened that morning. Something that no one can explain. And ever since then, part of me has been waiting for it to happen again. Sometimes I walk past the cabins and wonder which name will be next. Which door will open and never close again? Which smile will vanish between shifts? No sound, no clue. Just empty space. The Emerald Princess sails on. But not all of us sleep through the night anymore. Some of us remember. And some of us are still watching. We found the tent late in the afternoon, after a long day of hiking through the Georgia section of the Appalachian Trail. My friend Jamie and I had been on the trail for almost a month, moving from one camp to the next, crossing streams, pushing through ridgelines, and staying ahead of early fall storms. We were both experienced, cautious, and respectful of the wilderness. We followed trail markers, left no trash, logged our stops, and avoided off-limits areas. We knew the rules. We had done this before. But nothing prepared us for what we found in that clearing. It was supposed to be a good spot. Flat ground, sheltered by trees, near a stream. We'd seen it marked on a few trail blogs as a decent overnight site. But when we arrived, we realized someone else had been there before us. Recently, the tent stood in the center of the clearing, its flaps hanging open, unmoving in the still air. The fire pit was cold. A metal pot sat beside it, half covered in ash. Backpacks were tossed against a log. A sleeping bag had been dragged partway out of the tent, like someone had gotten up in the middle of the night and never returned. It looked abandoned, but not old. Maybe a day, maybe less. Jamie called out. No response. We waited. Still nothing. We walked toward the tent. That was when I saw the first tear. A long, clean slash along the side of the fabric. At first, I thought it was wear and tear, or maybe damage from a branch. But as I moved closer, I saw more. 3 separate slashes, all smooth, all deliberate. The edges curled slightly, as if cut with something sharp. Inside the tent, everything was a mess. Clothes scattered. 2 more sleeping bags, both slashed open. A flashlight still on, battery dying, casting a weak glow against the wall. A notebook lay half crushed beneath a boot. I picked it up. The last page was scrawled in messy handwriting, the words uneven. It's not a bear. It's not human. It comes at night. The others don't believe me. They didn't hear it, but I saw it. That was it. No name, no date, no explanation. Jamie and I stood in silence for a long time. Eventually, we decided to keep moving. We didn't unpack. We didn't sit down. We didn't wait. We left the clearing and pushed deeper into the forest. The sun was already sinking. The shadows stretched long between the trees. Our headlamps clicked on as the trail darkened. That was when the noises started. At first, it was just the underbrush shifting. We stopped, turned, listened. Silence. Then more movement. Off to the side. Behind us. Each time we stopped, it stopped. Every time we moved, it followed. Never close. Just far enough to stay hidden. I tried to stay calm. I told myself it was an animal. A deer. A fox. Even a large raccoon. But then we saw the symbol. Carved into the bark of a tree beside the trail was a rough shape. A circle, split through the center by a jagged line. Fresh. Deep. The wood was still raw. The bark still bleeding sap. Jamie had noticed one earlier in the day, but we assumed it was a hiker's mark. This one was the same. And then we saw another and another. The symbols kept appearing, leading us forward. We didn't stop. By the time we found the gravel road, we were shaking. There was a ranger station a few hundred yards ahead, its porch light glowing like a lighthouse in the dark. We stumbled toward it, breathing hard, boots scraping on the stone. Behind us, the forest was silent again. But just before I stepped onto the porch, I turned around. At the edge of the tree line stood something tall, thin, unmoving, and then it was gone. Inside the ranger station, the lights were bright and unforgiving. The ranger on duty looked skeptical as we tried to explain what we had seen. He asked if we were sure we hadn't come across a bear den or stumbled onto someone else's campsite. He mentioned poachers, vagrants, storm damage, hallucination from dehydration. We were calm, measured, and clear. We explained every detail. The slashed tent, the abandoned gear, the notebook, the strange symbol on the trees, the sounds that followed us, the tall figure at the tree line. He said he'd take a look. The next morning, a small group was assembled. Another ranger joined in. Jamie and I agreed to lead them back to the clearing. They asked for GPS coordinates, but we hadn't marked it. We retraced our steps carefully, backtracking to where we thought the site had been. When we arrived, everything was gone. The clearing was empty. No tent, no backpacks, no sleeping bags. Not even the fire pit remained. The ash was gone. The pot we had seen was missing. The dirt looked smooth, undisturbed, as if no one had camped there in weeks. I stood in the middle of the clearing, trying to match it to the image in my memory. Same shape, same bend in the stream, same flat stone near the log where the bag had been. But now it was all clean, sterile. Even the symbol on the tree was gone, bark patched over. No marks. Jamie kept quiet. The rangers exchanged glances. One made a few notes, more for formality than concern. They walked the perimeter, checked for signs of trash, animal tracks, human prints. There was nothing. Eventually, they told us it was probably an abandoned site, cleaned up by someone before we returned. They said the wind could move tents, that wild animals could drag deer away, that people get paranoid after long stretches in the woods. We didn't argue. We hiked out the next morning. We didn't finish the trail. We didn't speak much on the way down. Something had changed. After returning home, I tried to let it go. Tried to file it away under the strange, the unexplained, the stressful. But weeks later, I opened my backpack to reorganize gear and found the silver locket. I had pocketed it during our rush to leave. It was half buried near the old fire pit, a glint of metal in the dirt. I hadn't looked at it since. Inside was a faded photograph, a family of 4, parents and 2 children, standing in front of a tent. The background was unmistakable, the same clearing, the same trees. I searched the local archives. Missing persons, hikers gone off trail, unsolved disappearances in that region of the Appalachian Trail. There were too many. The stories were scattered, inconsistent, often written off as accidents, exposure, or animal attacks. But enough of them described strange circumstances, unusual injuries, lost time, empty campsites. Some of them mentioned symbols. I never reported the locket. Jamie and I still talk sometimes, but we don't discuss that part of the trip. He sold most of his hiking gear the following spring. I kept mine, but I haven't used it since. Sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees outside my house, I hear something in it. A shift in tone, a weight behind the silence. I think about the photo. I think about the people who vanished without explanation. I think about the thing that moved through the forest that night. The shape that stood just out of reach, watching us as we ran. Not all places on the map are safe, even when the weather is clear and the paths are marked. Some places hide things that no one wants to explain. things that don't leave footprints, things that wake. And in the oldest parts of the woods, no tent fabric is thick enough to keep them out. I've been driving long-haul freight for most of my adult life. The highway doesn't scare me. Not bad weather. Not blown tires. Not being alone at night in the middle of nowhere. But I remember the exact moment everything changed. That moment came somewhere on Highway 95, slicing through the Nevada desert, under a sky so black it looked like the stars were drowning in it. I had left Phoenix earlier that afternoon, heading north to Seattle with a trailer full of electronics. It was a clean run. The radio kept me company as the sun dropped below the rocks. Night came quickly in the desert. By the time I reached the loneliest stretch of road, there were no headlights behind me, no cars ahead, nothing but my rig and the road. That's when I saw him. He was standing on the shoulder, a hitchhiker, young, maybe mid-20s. Worn-out jacket, dusty jeans, a backpack that looked heavier than it should have been. His thumb wasn't even raised at first. He just stood there, head low, shoulders hunched like he'd already been turned down too many times. I don't normally pick people up. Too many risks. But something about the way he stood made me slow down. There wasn't another vehicle for miles. No town lights. No emergency signs. Just this kid in the dark. I cracked the window and leaned out. Asked him where he was headed. He said anywhere but here. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't spoken in days. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door and told him to climb in. He introduced himself as Mike. He didn't shake my hand. Didn't ask where I was going. Just thanked me and stared forward, eyes fixed on the road. I figured he was cold or tired or both. We drove in silence for a while. The engine was the only sound between us. Eventually, he started to nod off. I didn't blame him. The desert pulls everything out of you. But not long after his breathing slowed, things started to change. It began with a twitch. His fingers jerked, then his shoulders, like he was trapped in a nightmare. Then he started muttering. The words didn't make sense at first. Something about shadows. Something about lights. Then louder. He begged someone not to let it in. He said I could see him. I reached over, trying to shake him awake. But before I could, he let out a sound that chilled me. Not just fear, something deeper. Like he'd seen something in his sleep that his mind couldn't hold. His eyes snapped open. He was fully awake now, panicked, gasping for breath. He looked straight ahead, then around the cab, his eyes darting toward the mirrors and corners. He whispered something. It followed me. I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer. His voice cracked when he said it again. It followed me into the truck. I pulled over onto the shoulder and turned to him. I asked again, what was he talking about? That's when he reached into his jacket. What he pulled out didn't look like much at first. Something small, maybe a rock. But when he unwrapped it from the cloth it had been hidden in, I felt a drop in the air around us. Like the temperature shifted without warning. It wasn't a rock. It was carved, covered in patterns that looked etched by something too precise for human hands. The designs curved and twisted, spiraling across the surface in ways that made my eyes want to turn away. He held it up without touching it directly. He told me he had found it in the desert, buried, hidden in the sand near what looked like a collapsed structure. He thought it was nothing. He pocketed it. That was 3 weeks ago. He hadn't slept since, not properly. Every time he tried, it came back. A figure, tall and thin, eyes too wide, limbs too long, no face, just presence. It stood at the edge of his vision, waiting. He said it was alive. Not the relic, but what it brought. He didn't know what it was, just that it wanted him. It had followed him ever since he touched the thing. He tried throwing it away, burying it, leaving it on a bus. But every time, it returned. And now, he said, there was only one way to be free of it. You had to give it to someone else. He placed the object on the dashboard between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I stared at the carvings, and the carvings seemed to stare back. Even in the dim glow from the instrument panel, the surface of the relic looked like it shifted slightly. Not in the way light normally reflects, but like it was breathing. He told me he had read stories after the nightmares began. He found old forums, dead blogs, even transcripts of conversations people claimed to have had with others who carried similar items. The details were always different. Sometimes it was a box, sometimes a coin, sometimes even a broken piece of glass, but the symptoms were the same. The presence, the dreams, the thing that waited, always waiting, and always the same outcome. Eventually, they passed it on. That's how he had survived this long. His voice cracked again when he said it. That he was sorry, that he didn't want to do this to anyone, but he had no choice. He said he was dying inside. I asked why he didn't just destroy it. He said he tried, burned it, smashed it with a hammer, left it in a canyon, then watched it show up again in his pack a day later. He said it couldn't be destroyed. Not by him. I told him I wouldn't take it. That I couldn't. He begged me. Said he hadn't slept more than an hour in weeks. Said he had tried everything else. He looked me in the eyes, and I saw what desperation really looked like. He didn't care about my answer anymore. He had already made up his mind. He just needed to be free. He got out of the truck before I could stop him. We were parked on a turnout just outside a small town, the desert wind brushing over the road like dry breath. He left the relic behind, wrapped again in that piece of cloth, closed the door, turned, and walked into the dark. I waited. I sat there for 10 minutes, staring at the cloth. I didn't touch it. I didn't move it. I just sat still, as if moving might wake something up. Eventually, I started writing again. I left it wrapped up and shoved it into the glove compartment. I don't know why I didn't throw it out. I just couldn't. A week passed, then another. I kept driving, avoiding night runs where I could. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pattern. Every time I looked into the mirrors at night, I thought I caught movement in the back of the cab, just at the edge. Never clear, always just out of view. I tried forgetting about it. That didn't work. I tried leaving it behind at a rest stop. But 3 days later, I opened the glove compartment, and it was there again, unwrapped. Now, it just sits there. Sometimes I think it's waiting. Other times, I think it's already made its choice. That it doesn't need permission. That by letting him in my truck, by hearing the story, by seeing the thing, I became part of it. I haven't heard from Mike since that night. I don't know if he's alive. I don't know if he passed it on to someone else. I've searched for him, but his name doesn't show up anywhere. No social media, no missing persons reports, nothing. I still do long hauls. I still drive at night, but I watch the mirrors now. And sometimes, when the road is empty, I feel something moving in the cab behind me. Not a sound, just a shift in weight, a sense of pressure. Like the air has changed, like something is riding with me. I don't touch the relic, I never have. But I wonder how long that will last. Because sometimes it doesn't matter what you choose. Sometimes the thing chooses you. When I first arrived at Willow Creek Farm, it looked like any other overgrown rural property. Fences sagging under their own weight, weeds reclaiming the gravel driveway, an old barn with a roof that looked like it hadn't held out a storm in years. But it was quiet, and it was mine to work. That was enough. I had taken the job right after graduating. A basic farmhand position, room and board included. I was broke, tired of interviews, and ready to spend time outdoors. The farm belonged to a man named Mr. Harrison. He was well into his 60s, lean from decades of labor, and not much for conversation. He showed me to the apartment above the garage, told me what chores to handle, and left me alone. We didn't talk much during that first month. He gave instructions in short bursts. Fix the gate. Move the cattle. Don't go past the northern fence. When I asked about that last one, he said the ground was unstable. I didn't push it. The land was wide. Most of it fields, a few acres of woods beyond the barn, and a dried-up creek that gave the place its name. It felt isolated but not lonely. I got used to the rhythms quickly. Feed, repair, rest. Then came the day he asked me to clear out the east barn. That barn hadn't been opened in years. The door stuck in its frame. Dust filled the air the second I cracked it open. Inside, the place was a mess. Old equipment, rusted tools, collapsed shelves, moldy sacks of feed. The air had a chemical bite beneath the smell of hay. I kept the doors wide to let the breeze cut through it. Hours passed. I sorted everything into piles. Scrap, salvage, burn. I wasn't thinking about anything beyond the next load when my boot caught on something. It was a loose floorboard, half buried under a mound of canvas. I pried it up. Beneath it, tucked into a shallow cavity, was a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. It was heavy, maybe the size of a large book. I pulled it out and unwrapped it on the workbench. It was a leather-bound journal, old but not rotted, the edges stained and stiff. The handwriting inside was thin and angular, slanted hard to the right. It began like a normal farm ledger. Dates, livestock numbers, fertilizer ratios, but the entries changed quickly. The author, I realized, was Dr. Elliot Harrison, Mr. Harrison's father. The later pages were filled with strange notes. Not about corn yield or cattle births, but about genetic experiments. Crossbreeding, cell mutation, trial logs with numbers and strange acronyms, references to injections, hybrid viability. At first, I thought it had to be a joke, the ramblings of someone losing their grip, but the drawings were detailed. The charts were precise, and the names mentioned, local patients' volunteer numbers, were too specific. As I read deeper, the tone shifted from scientific to disturbed. The doctor mentioned subjects no longer reacting like animals. He wrote about behaviors he couldn't explain, aggression, human-like awareness, a growing sense of presence from something he had created. Then came the final pages. They were rushed, unsteady, desperate. They are in the woods now. I hear them at night. I tried to contain them. God help me. I stood there, in the half-lit barn, journal in hand, the sound of wind slipping through broken boards. That night, I barely slept. The next day, I tried to pretend it hadn't happened. I went about my chores. I didn't mention the journal, but I kept thinking about it. About the way the cattle refused to graze near the woods. About the fence Mr. Harrison told me never to cross. About the howls I had chalked up to coyotes. The third night after finding the journal, I woke to something tapping at my window. I sat up fast, heart in my throat. My room was on the second floor. Nothing should have been able to reach it. But when I pulled back the curtain, there was nothing there. Just a silhouette of trees under the moon. That morning, I confronted Mr. Harrison. I didn't tell him I found the journal. I asked instead about his father, about whether the farm had been used for anything else. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said something I haven't forgotten. Some things, he said, were meant to be buried. You start digging. You better be ready for what comes up. I didn't ask again. But later that day, I took the journal and went into the woods. I followed the old trail past the north fence. The ground was uneven, but it wasn't unstable. He hadn't told me to stay away because of safety. The forest was silent. After about 15 minutes, I found what I didn't know I was looking for. A structure, half swallowed by the trees. It looked like an old shed or hunting cabin, collapsed inward. The wood was gray, water damaged, but something about the shape felt wrong. Too wide, too low to the ground. Inside, there were metal restraints nailed to the walls. and bloodstains, old and dark, soaked into the floorboards. Something had happened here. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw the tracks. They looked like hoof prints, but not from cattle. Larger, more narrow, almost symmetrical. They led away from the building, deeper into the trees. I followed them only a few steps before I stopped, because ahead of me, through the brush, I saw movement. It was tall, not quite human, not quite animal. It crouched, then rose, limbs folding in unnatural ways. It turned slowly, but I didn't stay to see its face. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I was back at the barn, lungs burning, throat raw, legs threatening to give out. I slammed the doors shut behind me and braced them, though I knew it wouldn't do much if that thing had followed. But nothing came. The woods stayed still behind me. That made it worse somehow. I didn't tell Mr. Harrison what I saw. I didn't even go back to the house. I slept in the barn loft that night, curled in a blanket between bales of hay, the journal clutched under my arm like a weapon. I didn't sleep well. Every rustle in the walls made my heart race. I kept expecting to see something in the cracks, something long-limbed and watching. The next morning, the sky was overcast. The air smelled strange. I walked to the house, hollow-eyed, and knocked. Mr. Harrison opened the door slowly, stared at me for a second, then stepped aside to let me in. We sat at the kitchen table, and I laid the journal down between us. He didn't flinch. He said he'd hoped I wouldn't find it, that maybe I'd come, do a few months of work, and move on without digging deeper. But now that I had, he said, I deserved to know. His father, Dr. Elliot Harrison, had not been a typical farmer. He had been a biologist during World War II, assigned to a classified program researching ways to improve human performance, long-term survival, physical endurance, psychological adaptability. After the war ended, he came home with ideas he wasn't ready to give up, ideas he wanted to test. He used a farm as his lab. He took animals at first, cattle, pigs, and began experimenting. Selective breeding gave way to genetic injection, hormonal manipulation, accelerated development. And eventually, when the results plateaued, he crossed a line. He began working with human subjects. No one official, Mr. Harrison said. People who wouldn't be missed. Some were from shelters, some from institutions. He didn't keep them long, just enough time to inject them with whatever serum or compound he'd devised, then monitor what happened. Most of them died. A few changed. They stopped being people. Mr. Harrison said he remembered them from when he was a boy. He heard them moving in the barn at night. He saw what was left of the ones that didn't survive. He never told anyone. He was too afraid. When his father died in 1968, the program stopped. But by then, it was too late. Some of the hybrids had escaped. He tried hunting them, tried trapping them. He thought they died off in the woods. But he admitted now they hadn't. He knew they were still out there. That night, everything came to a head. A storm rolled in just after sunset. The wind shook the windows, and the rain came in waves so thick you couldn't see past the porch. I stayed in the main house. Mr. Harrison gave me the shotgun from behind the door without saying anything. We didn't speak much. We just sat in the living room, waiting. Then came the sound. Not thunder. Not wind, a crack. A heavy slam. Something had hit the back wall of the house. Then again, and again. Mr. Harrison stood. I followed. The back door was hanging open. The frame splintered. Rain poured through the gap. Furniture was knocked over. The kitchen table was broken. Claw marks tore through the paint on the floor. We moved carefully, stepping through the hallway, keeping to the walls. Then we saw it. One of them. It stood in the living room, half in shadow. Its spine was too long. Its arms hung down past its knees. It didn't wear clothes. Patches of hair clung to its back. Its face was warped, almost human, but not right. The eyes were too dark, the mouth too wide. Mr. Harrison raised the shotgun, but before he could fire, it lunged. The next few seconds blurred. Furniture overturned. The gun went off. I felt something slam into my shoulder. I hit the wall hard. The air knocked from my lungs. When I got up, the creature was gone, and Mr. Harrison was on the floor, bleeding badly from his side. He told me to go to the mantel. There was a syringe, a blue liquid. He said to find the others, if there were any, and use it. He said it was the only thing that worked. Then he passed out. I didn't wait. I took the syringe and the shotgun, and I went out into the rain. The creature hadn't gone far. I found it near the barn, hunched over, breathing hard. It turned when I approached, its mouth open but silent. I raised the syringe, moved fast, and drove it into its neck. It thrashed, then went still. And slowly, horribly, it began to change. The limbs shortened. The face collapsed in on itself. Skin shifted. When the process ended, what lay on the ground looked like a man in his 30s. Pale, thin, eyes closed. Mr. Harrison survived. So did I. But nothing went back to normal. In the weeks that followed, more were found. A few, not many. We used the serum. Each time, they changed back. Broken people. Some had been in that state for decades. None of them remembered how they got there. We buried the rest. Mr. Harrison made me promise to keep the story quiet. He said the world wouldn't believe it, and if they did, they'd come to take everything. Not to help, but to claim it, to study it, to use it all over again. I agreed. I still live on the farm. I keep to the house. I walk the fields. I check the edge of the woods once a week. Sometimes I hear things. Sometimes at night I see movement near the trees. And sometimes I wonder if we found them all, because there were more pages in the journal. Pages I haven't opened yet. Not because I'm scared of what they'll say, but because I already know what they will. I've been with the Nevada Highway Patrol for more than 20 years, and in that time, I've seen almost everything the desert can throw at a person. Wrecks, strange calls, ghost towns, even a few UFO reports that made local radio. But nothing ever stuck with me the way this case did. Not because it was the most dramatic, not even because it was violent, but because it never made sense. The call came in just past midnight. An abandoned vehicle had been spotted on the side of Highway 50 by a passing trucker. Headlights on, engine running. No driver. It wasn't unusual. Sometimes people pulled over to sleep. Sometimes they wandered off to relieve themselves or make a call where the signal was better. I expected it to be routine. Highway 50, for those who don't know, has earned its nickname for a reason. The loneliest road in America. No gas stations for long stretches. No towns. No cell service. When it gets dark out there, it gets pitch black. I reached the vehicle about 30 minutes after the call. A silver sedan. Clean, mid-size, newer model. Hazard lights blinking. The engine was still running. I parked behind it and approached with caution, calling out as I got closer. No one responded. The driver's side door was open about a foot. I checked inside. There was no one in the car. The keys were in the ignition. The eye case was on low. There was a duffel bag in the back seat, zipped shut. A cell phone sat in the center console, plugged in and charging. A nearly full bottle of water rested in the cup holder. Nothing looked out of place. No signs of a struggle. No broken glass. No blood. Then I noticed the footprints. A single set, pressed into the dusty gravel just outside the driver's side door, heading out into the open field beside the road. They were clear, deep. I followed them with my flashlight. The trail went straight for about 40 yards into the desert, then stopped. No turn, no stumble, No signs of a fall or anything disturbed. Just nothing. The tracks ended mid-step, like the person had lifted off the ground and vanished. I checked the area for other prints. There were none. No tire tracks nearby. No drag marks. No signs of another person. It was just a man walking into the desert, then disappearing. I radioed it in, called for backup, and waited. The desert was silent. When the second unit arrived, we searched together, extending the radius. Still nothing. The temperature had dropped and the wind picked up, but the tracks remained clear. We even cast the prints for evidence. The vehicle was registered to David Chen, age 37, a software engineer out of San Francisco. He was on his way to Denver to visit family. No criminal record. No history of mental illness. No known enemies. His family hadn't heard from him in 2 days, but that wasn't unusual during long drives. We towed the vehicle back to the lot and opened an investigation. In the following days, we scoured every lead. Financial records, phone logs, GPS data. David had been moving normally until he stopped on that road. No distress calls. No unusual messages. No gaps in behavior. We brought in scent dogs, drones, and aerial support. Thermal cameras. Local volunteers. Over the next week, more than 60 people searched the surrounding 5 miles of desert. They found nothing. No clothing, no body, no disturbance. Just one abandoned car, one set of footprints, and then nothing. People disappear all the time, but not like this. Not without a trace. Not without leaving behind some explanation. Still, eventually, the search was called off. The report was filed. The official status: missing person, presumed lost to the desert. Case open pending new evidence, but I couldn't let it go. After the case went cold, I started looking into it on my own time. Not officially, just out of curiosity, or at least that's what I told myself. The truth was, it haunted me. I couldn't stop thinking about those footprints, the way they just stopped like someone had been lifted straight off the ground. I'd seen dehydration, heat stroke, even hallucinations from exhaustion. This wasn't that. It didn't help that, a few weeks later, I got a tip. The call came late at night, just as I was finishing my shift. The voice was distorted, maybe through a cheap app or scrambled line. They told me to look into something called the Highway of Tears. Not the one in Canada, something older. Something people didn't talk about anymore. They said David wasn't the first to vanish like that, and he wouldn't be the last. Before I could ask who they were, they hung up. That night, I went down a rabbit hole. I started finding old news reports, buried articles. Most were local. None made national headlines. But the details were always similar. Cars found running with doors open. Personal belongings inside. Footprints leading away, always a single set. Never a struggle. Never an answer. A woman in Utah. A teenager in Arizona. A truck driver in New Mexico. Even one case in Australia, halfway across the world, that sounded almost identical. All of them disappeared from isolated highways, most of them at night. All with little to no warning. There were scattered witness accounts, flashes of light, brief memory loss, strange mechanical malfunctions, but nothing consistent, nothing solid. The deeper I dug, the more I realized there were too many cases to be coincidence. Something was happening on these roads, something no one could explain. One pattern kept coming up: electronic interference, dash cam shutting off, radios going to static, phone batteries draining all at once. In a few cases, the last phone pings before disappearance happened within seconds of these events. It wasn't just one highway. It was a network, scattered points connected by silence. I went back to the scene on my day off, middle of the day this time. The sun was high, and the desert was empty. I found the same place. I walked into the field. I found the endpoint where the footprints had stopped. I stood there a long time. The silence in that spot felt different. Not just quiet, but heavy. Like something was pressing in. No birds, no insects, just the wind. I stayed until my skin prickled, then turned back. But something had changed. My cruiser, parked just where I'd left it, had its lights blinking. I hadn't turned them on. The radio was on static. My phone, fully charged earlier, was completely dead. I got in and drove away fast. After that, I didn't go back. But I kept watching. 3 months later, a new case came across my desk. Another car, another highway, same conditions, different state. Footprints again, ending in nothing. The woman's name was Megan Hall, 29, school teacher. She was on a road trip, alone. She called her sister from a rest stop 2 hours before the disappearance. She said something strange, that she kept losing time, that she thought she'd passed the same turnoff twice, that she felt like the road was looping. Her last words were quiet. Something isn't right out here. Her car was found in the morning, engine still running, her phone in the queue folder, her bag untouched. Footprints, 40 yards, then nothing. I didn't go to the scene this time. I didn't have to. I knew what they'd find, and what they wouldn't. Now, every time I'm out on patrol, I watch the edges of the road. I check my dash cam twice before every shift. I keep backup batteries. I write down the time constantly, because I've realized something. It doesn't always matter if you're lost. Sometimes the road loses you, and when it does, you don't get to come back. I moved into a small basement apartment in early autumn. It wasn't fancy, but it was cheap, quiet, and just far enough from the city that I could sleep without traffic noise. The place had low ceilings, cream-colored walls, and a single window that faced a small backyard, half covered in ivy. I worked late hours, often until midnight, so I usually got home when the neighborhood was already asleep. I didn't mind. I liked the silence. I liked the isolation. My bed sat against the back wall of the bedroom, with the window just above it. Since it was a basement unit, the window started at ground level and only allowed a narrow strip of the outside world to be seen. Mostly, I saw grass dirt and the base of the wooden fence. That was all. Nothing more. At least, that's how it was for the first couple of weeks. One night, after getting home around 12:30 a.m., I went through my usual routine. I showered, ate something small, and got into bed. I always slept with the windows slightly open, just enough for fresh air. The nights were cool, and the breeze helped me fall asleep faster. That night, I woke up suddenly around 3 a.m. I didn't know why. No sound, no nightmare, nothing specific. I was just awake, heart beating fast, eyes wide open. My room was dark, except for a faint blue glow from the hallway nightlight. I rolled over to get comfortable again, and that's when I saw it. A face, pressed against the window. It was hard to tell how old the person was. His skin was pale, and his eyes looked sunken. He wasn't moving, just staring in at me, his face lit only by the faint outdoor light. His breath fogged up the glass in small bursts. I froze. My entire body went stiff. I didn't move, didn't blink. I just lay there and stared back at him, hoping I was still dreaming. Then he stepped back. Not far, just enough, so I could see his full figure. He was tall, thin, wearing something dark. His head tilted to the side, slowly, like he was studying me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to make a sound. I didn't want to draw attention. I stayed still, barely breathing. After what felt like forever, he walked away, just turned and vanished into the dark. I stayed awake until morning. When the sun finally came up, I went outside to check. There were clear footprints in the dirt outside the window, muddy, fresh, deep. Someone had been standing there for a long time. Just watching, I called the landlord. He told me there had never been problems in the area, but he'd add an outdoor light near my window. I also bought a thick curtain that day. At night, I shut the window and drew the curtain tight. I told myself it was probably just a drunk guy passing through. Maybe he didn't even know I lived there. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. A week went by. Nothing happened. I started to relax. Maybe it really was a one-time thing. I tried to forget about it. Then, one night, I noticed something strange. I had a cheap white rug in front of my bed. That morning, there was a single wet footprint on it. Just one, barefoot, as if someone had stepped inside, then vanished. I checked the locks, the windows, everything. All shut, all secure. Still, the footprint stayed in my mind. I didn't know how to explain it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept listening for sounds. My heart beat faster with every creak of the walls. Around 2 I turned on the lights and sat in the living room. I was too afraid to close my eyes. Around 3:15, I heard a faint tapping sound. It came from the bedroom. I didn't move. I sat there, gripping the arms of the chair, listening. The tapping continued, light, rhythmic like fingernails on glass. It was the window. I walked slowly to the bedroom door and peeked in. The curtain was closed. I stood still, watching. Then I saw the curtain shift slightly. Just a small movement, like something brushed against it. I didn't look. I turned on every light, grabbed my car keys, and left. I drove around for 2 hours, parked in a gas station lot, and waited for the sun. When I got home that morning, the curtain was wide open, and the window was unlocked. I hadn't opened it. I know I didn't. I moved my bed to the other side of the room that day. I pushed a tall shelf in front of the window. I nailed the curtain shut. I even set a broomstick against the sill to detect if anything moved. That night, I stayed awake, again. I sat in bed with the lights off, staring at the dark silhouette of the shelf. Around 2:45, I heard something faint. Breathing. Not mine. Slower, deeper, coming from behind the shelf. I didn't get up. I didn't move. I just lay there, frozen, until morning. I told the landlord I was leaving. I didn't ask for my deposit. I just packed what I could fit in my car and drove to my brother's place across the city. I slept on his couch for 3 nights. The first night, I slept fine. The second night, I had a nightmare. I was in my old room. The window was open. Someone was pulling the curtain aside. On the third night, I woke up to find the living room window wide open. I never opened it. I called my brother. He said I probably did it in my sleep, but I know I didn't. I don't sleepwalk. I don't even move much when I sleep. It happened again the next night. That's when I started locking my bedroom door. Not just the windows. The door too, but it doesn't matter. Last night, I woke up to find the door open. And the chair I put under the handle? It was across the room, facing the bed, no footprints, no broken locks. Nothing was stolen. Just that chair, placed perfectly, watching me. My name is Alex, and this trip was supposed to bring my family back together. Life had become too noisy, too fast, filled with distractions. Phones, screens, work, stress. We needed something real, something quiet. So we planned a camping trip, far away from all of it. Just my wife, our 2 kids, and me. Months of planning led us to Blue Pine Campground, deep in the mountains, surrounded by endless trees and silent air. We arrived late in the afternoon. The sun was dropping behind the tall pines as we set up camp. The kids were full of energy, running around, laughing as we pitched the tents and stacked firewood. Sarah smiled at me across the campsite. It felt good, like maybe this really was what we needed. That night, we roasted marshmallows and watched the firelight flicker across our kids' faces. The sky turned dark and the stars came out. We told stories around the fire, silly ones, scary ones. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. We were out there together, away from everything, and it felt like we'd found something worth holding on to. But it did not last. I woke up in the middle of the night, pulled from sleep by a sound outside the tent. Something was moving. Not a soft animal sound. This was heavier, slower. I held my breath and listened. Sarah was still sleeping beside me. I sat up and reached for the flashlight, careful not to wake her. My hand trembled slightly as I unzipped the tent flap. The cold air rushed in, and I shone the light out into the trees. At first, nothing. Then something moved just beyond the beam. A large shape slipped behind one of the trees, just on the edge of the clearing. I caught only a glimpse. It was tall, too tall. It moved quickly, silently. The light didn't catch a clear shape. My heart pounded in my chest. I zipped the tent shut and lay there in the dark, listening. Something was circling the camp. I could hear it, the crunch of dry leaves, the slow, steady weight of something walking. I stayed awake the rest of the night. When morning came, everything looked different. Bright, safe, but the damage was clear. Our cooler was flipped over, its contents scattered. Empty food wrappers lay across the ground. The edge of our tent had long marks, deep scrapes like claws. I didn't want to believe it. Maybe a bear, I told myself. But the tracks said otherwise. There, in the dirt between the tents, was a single footprint. It was enormous, not shaped like a bear. It looked wrong, stretched and uneven, like something that didn't belong to any animal I'd ever seen. Sarah came out of the tent and froze when she saw the mess. She looked at me, waiting for an answer. I said it had probably just been a curious animal, something passing through, but I could feel it watching. Even in the daylight, the woods around us felt too still. No birdsong, no wind. The silence pressed in from every direction. The kids looked scared. Lily clutched her stuffed rabbit. She asked if we could go home. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to pack everything and drive away. But when I turned the key in the ignition, nothing happened. The engine sputtered, died. I tried again. Nothing. I kept trying, hoping it was just a bad connection. But it was dead. Completely lifeless. I looked back at Sarah. Her face had gone pale. I told them I would hike to the ranger station. It was not far, just a few miles. An easy walk in the daylight. But Sarah grabbed my arm. Her hand was shaking. I could see it in her eyes. The same fear I felt but was trying not to show. We stood there for a moment, not knowing what to do. Then I made a decision. We would all go together. We packed a small bag with food and water, bundled up the kids, and started walking down the trail. I tried to keep my steps steady, my voice calm, but every snap of a twig made me look over my shoulder. Every shadow between the trees felt too deep. We had walked about halfway when Max spotted it. Another footprint, fresh, larger than the one at camp, pressed deep into a patch of wet dirt just off the trail. Sarah didn't say anything, but she held the kids tighter. We kept walking faster now as the forest around us grew darker. The sun was sinking again, the sky turning orange and red between the trees. The trail felt longer than it should have, as if the woods were stretching out. Then we heard it. A low sound, distant at first. A deep growling rumble that came from everywhere at once. Lily cried out, and Max started to sob. I picked Lily up. Sarah grabbed Max's hand. We ran. The sound followed us, growing louder, closer. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Branches slapped against our faces. Roots grabbed at our feet. I held Lily tight, stumbling forward through the dimming light, desperate to find anything. A road. A sign. A way out. Then, suddenly, we broke into a clearing. And there was a cabin. Not the ranger station. Something else. Small, old, but real. I ran for the door. The handle turned. It was unlocked. We fell inside, slamming the door behind us. We stood in the dark cabin, breathing hard, trying to listen. I could hear something moving outside, circling. It scratched against the walls, slow and careful. Then came that low, angry growl again. It rattled the wooden frame, made my skin crawl. I told the kids we were safe inside. I wanted to believe it. As our eyes adjusted, we saw more of the cabin. It was simple. One room, a fireplace, some shelves lined with old canned food, lanterns, blankets, a couch that sagged in the middle. It looked like an emergency shelter, maybe a hunting outpost. But in that moment, it was the safest place I had ever seen. Sarah lit the lanterns. The warm glow gave us some comfort. The kids huddled on the couch. Sarah pulled me aside. Her voice was low. She asked what we were going to do. What if the thing outside didn't leave? I told her we would wait. The food would last. Someone would come eventually. But I didn't believe it. Outside, it kept circling, scraping the walls, testing the door. Every so often, it would let out a sound so deep, made the windows shiver in their frames. The kids drifted off to sleep. Sarah and I took turns watching. I stared out the dark window, my eyes searching for movement. Then I saw it. The clouds shifted. The moonlight fell on the clearing. And there, standing at the tree line, was the thing that had been hunting us. It was taller than a man, covered in patches of fur, scales, and feathers, like it was made from pieces of different creatures. Its face was wrong, almost human, but twisted. Its eyes glowed in the pale light, yellow and bright. It looked straight at me, and then it smiled. Rows of teeth, sharp and wet. I stumbled back from the window. My breath caught in my throat. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might wake the kids. I backed away from the window slowly, hands shaking. I wanted to wake Sarah, to tell her, but what could I say that wouldn't shatter the fragile grip we had left on reason? I sat there in the half-light, gripping a fire poker I had found beside the hearth. Outside, the creature moved. I could hear it shifting. It was still watching. I felt it in my chest like pressure, like weight. It was not afraid. It was patient. It wanted us to know it was out there, and it had all the time in the world. Time became a blur. I don't remember falling asleep. But the next thing I knew, light was creeping through the cracks in the wooden walls. Morning had come. The thing was gone. The kids were stirring. Sarah rubbed her eyes and looked at me. I didn't have to say anything. She saw it on my face. We waited all day, hoping for the sound of a plane, the crunch of footsteps, a voice, anything. But the woods were silent. The forest outside looked normal again. Birds chirped. Trees swayed gently. But it all felt like a lie. Eventually, we stepped outside. There was no sign of the creature. The claw marks on the cabin were fresh, deep. The ground near the door was scarred with tracks. We followed the trail back toward our campsite, moving slowly, alert to every sound. When we reached the clearing, we saw them. People. Park rangers. A search party. Bright jackets. Radios. Relief swept over me so fast I nearly collapsed. One of the rangers came toward us, waving. He said they had found our abandoned car, fixed the battery, and followed our trail. I nodded but said little. What could I say? We told them we had gotten lost. Found the cabin. Waited out a rough night. They believed it. They wanted to believe it. The truth was something none of us were ready to face. We drove away. The kids laughed and talked in the back seat like it had all been a strange adventure. Sarah held my hand tight the entire way home. We never went camping again. But some nights, when the wind presses against the windows and the house creaks in the dark, I find myself thinking about that cabin, about the thing in the trees, about its eyes, and that smile. I wonder if it is still out there, in those woods, waiting, watching, waiting for the next family to come looking for peace, for escape, for something real. And I wonder if it remembers me, the one who saw it and survived. because some places do not want to be found, and some things once seen are never forgotten, and the wild does not forgive those who stumble into its deeper truths, especially not the things that wear smiles made of teeth. My name is Mia Chun. I boarded the Paradise of the Seas expecting a dream vacation, a Caribbean cruise. Clear water, warm sun, endless drinks. But what I experienced instead shattered my sense of reality and left me questioning everything I thought I knew about time and existence. I still remember how it started. It was a normal morning, or at least it should have been. I had woken up late, a bit foggy from the drinks the night before. Karaoke had gone on longer than I planned. I dragged myself out of bed, ate something greasy, and settled into a lounge chair by the pool with a cheap paperback. The sun was hot. The ocean was calm. The deck was alive with music and laughter. Families splashed in the water. Crew members handed out drinks with little umbrellas. I must have spent hours there, reading and soaking in the heat. Around midday, I decided to go back to my cabin. Just a short nap before dinner. That was all. I lay on the bed. The rocking of the ship was gentle, the hum of the engine steady. I remember closing my eyes. When I opened them, everything had changed. At first, I didn't know why I felt so strange. The light filtering through the cabin window was different, dimmer, tinted blue, as if something thick hung in the air outside. My phone was black, dead. I remembered charging it the night before. I reached for the room phone, pressed the button for the front desk. Nothing. Just a soft, broken hum. The silence crept in slowly. There were no voices in the hallway, no footsteps, no music over the intercom. Just an unnatural stillness pressing down on the room. I stood up and opened the door. The hallway was empty. I stepped out. Everything was too quiet. My footsteps echoed on the carpeted floor. The lights above flickered faintly. Every door was closed. No signs of anyone. I made my way to the elevators, heart beating faster with each step. I pressed the button. It dinged, opening like normal. I stepped inside. As it rose toward the upper deck, I tried to make sense of what was happening. Maybe I'd slept through something, an emergency drill. Maybe everyone had been evacuated. But why would they leave me? The doors slid open. The pool deck was deserted. Chairs still sat in neat rows. Some had towels laid out, half-read books. The bar counter was full of untouched drinks, condensation still clinging to the glasses. The pool water shimmered, undisturbed. Not a soul in sight. I walked slowly past the bar, past the rows of chairs. I called out once, then again. No answer. The only sound was the soft roll of waves against the ship's hull. And even that seemed too quiet, too distant. Panic started to rise. I ran through the ship, searching every floor. The dining halls were set for dinner, napkins folded into perfect shapes. The casino machines blinked in silence. One still flashed a jackpot win. No one dared to collect it. The theater lights were on. A set half-built stood on stage. A spotlight still illuminated an empty stool. Backstage, costumes hung neatly on racks. Nothing disturbed. Nothing moved. In one hallway, I found a child's stuffed toy lying in the middle of the floor. In the laundry room, a dryer still tumbled a load of clothes. A bra, a towel, a pair of jeans spinning endlessly. The hum of the machines was the only thing left that made any sense. I searched for hours. Eventually, I climbed to the bridge, hoping someone might be there. Anyone. But the door stood ajar. The room was empty. Monitors still flickered. Navigation screens showed the ship floating steadily in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. Lights blinked. Systems operated. The ship was on course, humming along like nothing was wrong. But there was no crew. No captain. No one steering. Just me, and an entire cruise ship floating in an impossible silence. I sat in the captain's chair, unable to move. That was when I noticed the display panel to my right. It showed the date. My mouth went dry. August 13th. A week had passed. 7 full days gone. I had closed my eyes for a nap, and when I opened them, the world had moved without me. I laughed. Not a normal laugh, but something high and strained. The kind of sound that escapes when your mind has nothing else to offer. I tried to remember anything, how I got there, what had happened. But there was nothing, no memories, no gaps to fill. Just that blue-tinted light and the overwhelming emptiness. I spent the next few days wandering the ship. I left notes in every public space. I taped messages to doors. I tried the intercom system. Nothing worked. I wrote in my journal, talked out loud just to hear something human. I made a game of it. I would explore one deck per day, sleep in a different cabin each night. It helped a little. I ate cold food from the ship's massive kitchens. The ice cream machine still worked. I kept the lights on every hallway I walked down, just so I wouldn't feel completely swallowed by the dark. I tried to sleep, but my dreams were twisted. Flickering images of people with blurred faces. The sound of water, louder than it should be. Time started to slip. I stopped knowing what day it was. I measured hours by the slow crawl of the sun and the pacing of my own thoughts. Then, something changed. It happened on what I thought was the 4th day. I saw lights. At first, I didn't believe they were real. I had imagined so many things by then. Faces in windows, shadows on the stairs. But this was different. These were distant pinpoints on the horizon, flickering and growing brighter. At first, I thought another ship had found me. A rescue team. A Coast Guard vessel, finally answering my silent calls. Hope filled my chest like fire. I ran to the bow of the ship, waving my arms, yelling into the wind even though I knew no one could hear me. But as the lights grew closer, I realized something was wrong. They were not on the sea. They were descending from the sky. They hovered in perfect silence. Bright orbs, pulsing with strange colors. Red, blue, violet. Colors I couldn't quite name. They shimmered over the water, casting moving shadows across the deck. I stared, frozen. The lights felt alive. Then a beam came down. It struck the deck a few feet away from where I stood. A narrow column of light. I stepped back, heart pounding, and then everything shifted. There was no sound, no warning. 1 second, I was alone. The next, the ship was full of people. The deck around me filled with passengers. Men, women, children. Crew members in uniforms, all blinking, confused, looking around. Someone bumped into me. I stepped back and stared. They were all here. Thousands of people. Just as I remembered them. Someone asked if I was okay. A man in a captain's uniform approached me, looking worried. He said I looked pale. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. I couldn't find the words. How could I explain what had happened? In the hours that followed, things returned to normal. The crew resumed operations. The ship continued on course. People were dazed, but they all insisted the same thing, that no time had passed. One moment they were relaxing, eating, swimming. The next, they were standing on the deck, unsure how they got there. Only I remembered the days. Only I remembered the silence. Only I remembered the sky filled with impossible lights. When we reached port, the story exploded across the news. Experts argued on television. Headlines asked how an entire ship could vanish from satellite tracking for almost a week. People proposed everything: electrical failure, military testing, mass hysteria. A few whispered about time slips or interdimensional events. A handful mentioned aliens. But no one could explain it. No one except me. And I didn't try. I gave my official statement. I told them I remembered nothing. I said I'd been asleep, that I woke up confused like everyone else. They seemed satisfied with that. What else could I say? That I wandered a ghost ship for days? That something took everyone else, left me behind, and then returned them like nothing happened? That something outside our world had watched me from the sky? I went home. I tried to go back to my life, but everything felt thinner now, like the world had stretched too far and was about to tear. I stopped traveling. I stopped talking about the cruise. Sometimes, in the dead hours of night, I wake up cold and gasping, convinced I'm still there, that I never really came back, that I'm walking some half-life, just waiting for the lights to return. I still have the old cruise key card. I keep it locked away in a drawer. Sometimes, when I touch it, the room around me dims just slightly. The light bends wrong, and I feel a pressure in my skull, like something remembering me. I don't know what happened aboard the Paradise of the Seas. I don't know where everyone went or why only I remained. I don't know what those lights were, but I know this. Time is not as simple as we believe. Reality has seams, cracks, weak points, and sometimes something pushes through. If you ever take a cruise and you feel the air grow still, or you see light moving where it should not, or you wake up to a ship filled with silence, remember my story and pray with everything you have that you are not the one left behind. My name is Daniel. I thought this trip would be quiet, peaceful, a break from the rush of everyday life. It was meant to be a gift, something for both of us. Emily and I had been dating a year, maybe a little more, and the weight of work and deadlines had started to take its toll. The cabin seemed perfect, secluded, no cell service, no signal, just the two of us and the woods. We arrived on a Friday afternoon. The drive was rough, all winding roads and loose gravel. The final stretch made us question whether the trip was worth it. But then the trees opened and the cabin came into view. Nestled between tall pines, it looked like something out of a brochure. Wooden porch, 2 small bedrooms, a little fireplace. The quiet wrapped around us like a blanket. The man who handed us the keys was named Bill. He was older, the kind of man who squinted a lot and barely smiled. He gave us a quick tour. His eyes kept shifting to the tree line as he talked, like he was watching for something. Before he left, he stopped on the porch and told us not to wander in the woods after dark. Said there were wild animals. He told us not to worry if we heard strange things at night. Just raccoons, probably. Then he paused, like he wanted to say more, but didn't. He told us to keep the doors and windows shut after dark. Always. Then he got in his truck and drove away. Fast. Emily laughed, said he was probably just trying to spook us. I pretended to laugh too, but I was already thinking about the look on his face. That nervous glance toward the woods. That evening was perfect. The sun dipped behind the trees and everything turned gold. We hiked a little, made dinner on the old stove, played board games by lantern light. Outside, the woods were quiet. Then we found the scratches. They were along the inside edges of the cabin's doors, around the window frames. Deep marks, long and ragged, like claws. I ran my fingers along one, feeling the grooves in the wood. Emily guessed maybe a bear had once gotten in, but the scratches didn't look old, and they weren't random. They looked deliberate. We went to bed. The cabin was cold, so we curled under the covers, listening to the wind in the trees. That's when it started. Soft at first, a scratching sound, like nails against the wood outside. Not constant. 2 scrapes, then silence. A pause, then 2 more, like a rhythm. I held my breath. Emily stirred beside me. The sound moved, from one wall to the next, then to the window. A slow, steady tap. Something was testing the glass. Emily whispered my name, barely audible. I nodded, not speaking. We just lay there, not moving. The scratching moved around the cabin, a slow circle. It felt like hours before it finally stopped. When morning came, we pretended to laugh it off. Maybe it was raccoons. Maybe just branches. We told ourselves that, and we tried to believe it. We spent the day hiking, found a quiet lake. The sun made it all feel harmless. That night, we locked every window, pulled the curtains tight, tried to distract ourselves with wine and card games. The scratching started again, earlier this time, and louder. Not just scratching now. There was a sound, a low noise. Not quite a growl, not quite a voice. Something in between. Like something trying to speak without words. Emily looked at me, pale. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't need to. We knew it wasn't a raccoon. I turned off the lantern, and we sat in darkness, listening. It moved around the cabin again. We could hear it dragging itself along the walls. It pressed against the doors, the windows. Then came the knock. It was clear. A knock on the front door. Not loud, not frantic, just steady, measured. Someone whispered outside. A voice. Human, maybe. Asking to be let in? I couldn't move. Neither of us spoke. We waited. Eventually, the sound faded. At dawn, we checked every inch of the cabin. More claw marks. Deep. Fresh. The kind that splintered the wood. One of the porch beams had been cracked. The edge of the cabin wall was gouged open like something had dragged a heavy blade across it. I wanted to leave. But the car keys were in the living room. That night, we stayed awake. We kept the lights off, sat in silence. Then, headlights swept across the front windows. A truck. It was Bill. He walked to the porch with a flashlight and knocked. This time, we answered. He stepped inside without a word, his eyes scanning the cabin. He looked at the walls, the scratches. Then he looked at us. He said he was sorry. Said he should have warned us properly. He told us something was wrong with this land. Bill didn't sit down. He stayed near the window, his shoulders tense, like he was listening for something outside. He told us the land wasn't right, had never been right. He said he'd grown up nearby, that he'd heard stories his whole life. People disappeared out here, he said. Sometimes hikers, sometimes campers, sometimes locals. Most never turned up again. Others did, but they came back wrong. Quiet, lost in thought. And always with deep scratches on their arms. Like something had touched them and left its mark. Bill said he didn't know what lived in the woods. Not exactly. But it had always been there. It came and went, like the seasons, but never far. He said it didn't like strangers, especially strangers who stayed too long. He told us the thing outside was not a bear, not a man, something older, something hungry. We sat on the floor with blankets wrapped around us, barely speaking. Bill stayed near the door, one hand on the heavy fireplace poker. Every so often, he'd look toward the window. Then we heard it again, the scraping. Long, slow, dragging sounds against the wood. It circled once more, a familiar pattern. It tested the windows, moved to the door, a knock, then silence. Bill whispered that it couldn't come inside, not unless it was invited. That was the rule. He didn't know where the rule came from, only that it held, for now. We waited in silence for the rest of the night. Eventually, the scratching faded. By sunrise, it was gone. The trees looked peaceful again. The light poured into the clearing like nothing had happened. Bill stood up, told us it wouldn't come back during the day. He said we should leave now. He would refund the money. No hard feelings. He told us not to tell anyone. No one ever believed the truth, and those who did only ended up coming back. Curiosity killed more than just cats out here. We packed in silence. The road down the mountain felt longer than before. Every turn in the road made me glance at the woods, half expecting to see something standing among the trees, watching. We didn't speak about it much after that. Not to each other. Not to anyone else. Some things lose power when you try to explain them. But not this. This felt like something that only grew stronger when spoken aloud. We went back to our lives, work, schedules, normal things. But every so often, I think I hear that sound. Late at night, scratching, like something remembering. I don't know what lives in those woods. I don't know what it wanted, or what would have happened if we'd opened the door. But I know this. There are places in this world where something waits just beyond the wall, behind the trees, beneath the surface. And when you hear it knocking, you must never answer. Because once it knows you hear it, it never forgets. And one day, it might come back. My name is Mike Callahan. I've spent most of my life behind the wheel of a semi hauling freight across the country. I've driven through storms, across mountain passes, down empty highways that stretch farther than the eye can see. Out there, in the quiet between towns, you see things. Strange lights. Sudden weather that makes no sense. Voices on the CB that vanish into static. After a while, you stop asking questions. You keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes forward. But there are some things that won't let you forget. It was a long haul from Seattle to Miami. Nothing too unusual. Electronics in the trailer, tight schedule, same as always. I was ahead of time, pushing through the New Mexico desert after midnight. The road stretched out in silence, headlights carving a narrow tunnel through the dark. The only sound was the engine and the occasional burst of chatter on the CB. Familiar voices, keeping each other company through the long hours. Then something different came through. A voice ragged and desperate, full of static, asking for help. Said he was at the old Starlight truck stop. Said something was there. Said it was coming back. Then the transmission cut off. I tightened my grip on the wheel. There are plenty of prank calls on the CB. Kids messing around, drunks with radios. But this didn't feel like that. The voice was too real, too scared. I tried to respond, but the static swallowed everything. I should have kept driving. The 20 years on the road had taught me one thing. Sometimes a trucker is all the help a person has. I signaled, took the next exit, and turned onto a cracked service road that barely looked like a road anymore. My headlights picked out weeds, dirt, scraps of old metal. The desert crept in from every side, and then I saw it. The Starlight, or what was left of it. Once it had been a busy place, lit up in neon, a lifeline in the middle of nowhere. But now it was a shell. The sign was shattered. The building half collapsed, windows boarded, roof sagging. Nothing moved. I pulled in slowly, left the engine running. The lot was empty. I called out, hoping maybe someone would answer. Silence. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out. The air was dry, dead still. I walked toward the main entrance. The doors had been ripped open, boards hanging loose, as if something had forced its way in or out. Inside, dust covered everything. The smell of rot lingered in the air. Tables overturned, plates broken on the floor. It looked like the place had been abandoned for years, but something felt wrong, like it hadn't always been empty. I made my way to the kitchen. That's when I saw it. A CB radio, sitting on the counter, new, shiny, not covered in dust like the rest. It looked completely out of place. I stepped closer. That's when I noticed the symbols. They were carved into the floor. Circles, angles, marks that looked like they had been drawn in something dark and dry. At first, I thought it was paint. Then I knew it wasn't. A sound came from behind me. Not loud, just wrong. I turned around slowly and saw it, standing in the doorway. It looked human, almost, but too tall. Its limbs were long and jointed wrong. Its skin pale and tight, stretched over bones that didn't move right. And its face, blank, smooth skin, except for a mouth that split it open top to bottom. Rows of teeth, all the same size. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. I just stared. The thing stepped forward, slow, purposeful. It didn't stumble. It didn't lurch. It glided. The last thing I saw before I lost consciousness was its hand reaching out. Long, bone-thin, nails like claws. I woke up in the driver's seat of my truck. The engine was off. The sun had not yet risen, but the first gray light was bleeding into the desert. I sat there, stunned. For a few long moments, I couldn't tell if I had dreamed the entire thing. But then I looked at my hands. Scratches. Thin lines down both arms like something had gripped me, dragged its nails across my skin. My clothes were covered in dust. My boots, caked in dirt I didn't recognize. And sitting on the passenger seat, quiet and impossible, was the CB radio from inside the abandoned diner. I stared at it for a long time. My logbook showed a gap. I had lost nearly 6 hours. 6 hours gone. No memory of where I had been or what had happened after I saw that thing. Eventually, I started the engine and drove away. Didn't stop until I hit the nearest town and found a cheap motel. I locked the door, closed the curtains, and sat on the bed shaking. The scratches burned. My head pounded. I checked the radio over and over. It didn't make a sound. Just sat there. Quiet. Still. I told myself I'd imagined it. A hallucination. Maybe I'd fallen asleep behind the wheel and dreamed the whole thing. But I knew that wasn't true. The blood on my shirt told me it wasn't. I thought about going to the police. But what could I tell them? That I drove out to an abandoned truck stop in the middle of the night after hearing a ghost on the radio and was attacked by a creature with no face. They would have locked me up. And maybe they should have. Instead, I finished my run. Delivered the shipment. Went home. I didn't tell anyone. But I kept a CB radio. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I couldn't explain why. I didn't want it, but I also didn't want to lose track of it. So I locked it in a metal box, put chains around it, stuck it in the back of a storage unit, somewhere far away. But sometimes I hear it. In the dead hours of the night, a faint crackle, a voice begging for help, the same words, over and over. Like a loop stuck in time, I started doing research. It wasn't easy. The Starlight truck stop hadn't been officially listed in years. But I found stories, old ones, truckers disappearing, locals saying it was cursed, rumors of a burial ground beneath the site. Some claimed it was a door to another place, something older than people, something that fed on the lost and the lonely. The story stretched back decades. I stopped driving nights after that. I started avoiding routes that took me anywhere near that part of the state. I turned down jobs that would bring me close. I didn't want to hear anything more about the place. But the more I tried to forget, the more I remembered. I still see it sometimes. In my dreams. In the edges of sleep. The thing that moved like smoke. That wore a human shape without understanding what it meant. Its face, blank. Its hands, reaching. I wonder if I really left that night. If maybe part of me stayed behind. Or, worse, if something else came back in my place. I still hear the voice. Not on the radio now, in my head, calling out, begging me to return. And sometimes I want to. Not because I'm curious. Not because I need answers. But because I think it's waiting. And whatever it is, I think it remembers me. If you ever find yourself driving a long, lonely highway late at night, and the static on your radio starts to sound like a voice, don't answer. And if you see an exit that wasn't there before, leading to a place called the Starlight truck stop, keep driving. Don't slow down. Don't look back. Because some places don't let you leave the same way you came. And some calls for help don't come from people at all. My name is Jack Harper, and I've been farming the same stretch of land for most of my life. This place has been in my family for generations. My great-grandfather cleared the first acre with nothing but a mule and a rusted plow, back before electricity came to this part of the state. We've had droughts, floods, heat waves, storms. The land takes what it wants, but it usually gives something back. That summer, it took more than I ever thought possible. It started with small things. A few of my cows broke through the fence one night and scattered into the north pasture. They were spooked, eyes wide, breathing hard. I thought maybe a coyote had slipped through or a bobcat. But there were no tracks, no broken branches. Just panic, lingering like smoke in the air. Then my tractor's electronics began acting up. One minute it was fine. The next, every light on the panel blinked red. The dashboard flickered, the GPS glitched. Then the whole system died. I chalked it up to age. Machines wear down. Wires corrode. That's what I told myself. But then came the lights. I was sitting at the kitchen table one night, thumbing through invoices when the world outside lit up. At first, I thought it was headlights, maybe someone pulling into the drive. But the light came from the back, where the wheat field stretched out to the tree line. I stood, walked to the window, and stared. 3 orbs floated above the field. They didn't move like drones or helicopters. They hovered, weightless, pulsing in rhythm. Their light had no clear source, no shape to hold it. Just pure brightness, white tinged with blue, shifting in tone like breath. They cast no shadow, no heat. The wheat below them bent and shimmered, not like it was blown by wind, but like it was reacting to their presence. I watched until the orbs rose suddenly, shooting into the sky without a sound. Gone. I didn't tell anyone. I knew how it would sound. Instead, I waited. I sat up the next night and the next, but they didn't return. Then, one morning, I stepped out onto the porch, and everything changed. In the middle of the field, the wheat was flattened in a perfect circle. Stalks laid down, not broken, woven together in a pattern so intricate I couldn't begin to understand it. Circles nested within spirals, geometric lines that curved and intersected with impossible precision. The kind of thing no human could pull off in a single night, not without heavy equipment, and even then, it would leave marks. But the soil around it was untouched. No tracks, no tire prints, just that woven mass of wheat. I called the sheriff. He came out, stood beside me, arms crossed, staring. Said it was probably a prank. Teenagers with a drone and too much time. But he didn't sound convinced. I pointed out the lack of tracks, the undisturbed rows surrounding the circle. He had no answer. By midday, the story had spread. Reporters showed up. Paranormal bloggers. Curious strangers with cameras and notebooks. They gathered at the edge of my property, leaning on fences, trying to get a closer look. I turned most of them away. But the real trouble didn't start until after they left. The animals were the first to change. My dogs wouldn't go near the field. One of them growled at the window all night. The cattle bellowed, restless, their eyes wide and white. They huddled in corners of their pasture, far from the wheat. I found deep gouges in the barn walls the next morning, as if something had tried to claw its way inside. The equipment problems got worse. My phone died minutes after charging. The TV displayed nothing but static. When sound did come through, it wasn't speech. Just whispers, a language I didn't recognize. Strange patterns appeared on the screens, moving like living things. I stopped sleeping. When I did drift off, I dreamed of the field. Not how it looked in daylight, but how it felt. Heavy, watchful, like it was alive. Something was in the circle. Something just beyond the edge of what I could see. I woke one morning with a headache and an urge I couldn't explain. I sat down at the table and started drawing. Symbols, shapes. I didn't know what they meant, but my hand moved without thinking. The same curved lines from the field. My fingers trembled. I tore the page up and burned it in the sink. That was when Dr. Alan Fredman showed up. He was an astrophysicist from the university. Said he had seen the reports. Said the pattern in my field matched others. Claimed this had happened before. Quiet cases. No official attention. Always the same signs. Lights in the sky. Electronic interference. Animals fleeing. And always the same end. Someone disappeared. He didn't say it like a warning. He said it like a fact. Dr. Fredman asked if I'd experienced any unusual dreams. I told him I hadn't slept in days. He nodded, like that was expected. Then he told me something I didn't want to hear. He said the crop circles were connected, that every one of them was part of a pattern, stretching across states, maybe across continents. The symbols embedded in them weren't random. They were part of something larger, a map, a signal, or maybe an invitation. He said people closest to the circles experienced behavioral changes, obsession, sleep disruption, cognitive interference. Sometimes they claimed to hear voices. Sometimes they vanished, gone without a trace. He asked if I'd heard anything, if I'd seen anything since the night the lights appeared. I didn't answer. He asked to install sensors, cameras, instruments to monitor the field. I agreed, though part of me already knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever was happening had already begun. His team moved in fast. They placed small black devices along the perimeter, blinking slowly like they were breathing. They tested the soil, took samples of the wheat. Every result confused them. The wheat was bent but unbroken, as if softened like wet thread and restructured. No tool could replicate it, not without destroying the plant. They didn't find radiation, no chemical traces. But the field pulsed with something else. A low frequency, barely detectable, like the hum of a thought being repeated over and over. Each night, the dreams grew stronger. I stood in the field in my sleep, at the center of the pattern. The stalks around me whispered without wind. I felt something moving beneath the soil, not crawling, turning, like it had been asleep and was slowly waking up. And always I felt the urge to walk into the field while awake, to stand in the center, to see what it wanted to show me. Every morning, it was harder to resist. On the 7th night, everything changed. I was awakened just past midnight by a deep vibration. Not sound, something deeper, like it came from the earth itself. The house trembled slightly. I looked out the window and froze. The field was glowing. A blue-white light pulsed from the circle, rising and falling in rhythm. The same lights from before hovered above it, motionless. This time, they were descending. I left the house without thinking. My feet moved. I didn't put on shoes. I walked barefoot across the damp grass, drawn forward by something stronger than fear. I reached the edge of the circle. Then a hand grabbed my arm. Dr. Fredman stood there, his face pale, eyes wide. He told me if I stepped inside, I wouldn't come back. I fought him. The pull was unbearable. My head filled with images, planets spinning, strange constellations, towers rising from dark water. None of it made sense, but it felt true, like memories I'd never lived. He didn't let go. Eventually, the light faded. The orbs rose. There was a flash, brighter than daylight. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, the sky was empty. The glow was gone. The field was silent again. By morning, the government had arrived. Vehicles, uniforms, no markings. Fredman and his team were escorted off the property. They took my samples, my journals. They asked questions I couldn't answer. Then they left. The field was stripped bare. The wheat was destroyed. The soil tilled under. The story in the news was simple. Hoax, tourist stunt. Nothing real. But I know the truth. I still live here. I still work the land. But that part of the field never grew again. No matter what I plant, nothing takes root. The soil is dead. But at night, I can still hear it. The hum, low and steady, calling. I don't know what I would have seen if I had stepped inside. I don't know what would have happened if Fredman hadn't stopped me. But sometimes I think about it. And sometimes I wish I'd gone in. Because whatever touched this place, it's still out there. And I don't think it's finished yet. If you ever see lights in the sky, if you wake up and find your fields carved with something no person could have made, don't get close. Don't listen. And no matter what you feel pulling at you, don't step into the center. Because once you do, there's no coming back. My name is Alex, and I've been driving long-haul routes for over 10 years. It's not glamorous, and it's not easy, but it's honest. I've seen all kinds of strange things on the road, weather that changes without warning, lights in the sky, empty towns where the buildings stand, but no one's lived in them for years. You start to tune it out. Focus on the job. Deliver the freight. Get home safe. But some things stay with you. It was a standard route, St. Louis to Portland. Electronics in the trailer, tight schedule. I'd been on the road all day, trying to make up time after a delay. No music, no chatter on the CB. Just the hum of tires and the black ribbon of highway ahead. I was tired. My eyes had started to burn. The inside of my skull felt thick. The darkness outside the windshield seemed to press in closer. I saw the sign for a rest stop and felt a rush of relief. A place to stretch, splash some water on my face, get a coffee from a vending machine. The rest stop appeared like a little island of light in the dark. It wasn't new. It had one of those small square buildings with flickering fluorescent lights, a few vending machines, restrooms, and a separate lot for trucks. A few cars were already parked in the main lot, but I didn't see anyone. That should have been the first red flag. I pulled in, parked, stepped out of the cab. The air was unnaturally still. Not quiet like peace, but quiet like pressure. Like something holding its breath. No wind, no insects, no night sounds. I walked toward the building. My boots echoed sharply on the pavement. I reached for the door and pushed it open. It creaked in protest. Inside, the light buzzed overhead, harsh and pale. The place was empty. I went to the restroom, ran cold water over my face, stared into the mirror. My reflection looked worse than I felt, skin pale, eyes sunken. Behind me, the door to the bathroom hung slightly ajar. As I looked up, I saw it. Movement. Just a flicker. A shadow, shifting in the mirror's corner. I spun around. Nothing. The hallway outside was empty. I stepped out, heart ticking faster now. I crossed the small building and stopped at the vending machines. That's when I noticed the details. A jacket draped over a chair like someone had just stepped away. A phone left on a table. The screen still lit. And in the trash beside the door, a paper cup. A coffee cup. Still steaming. Someone had been here moments ago. I stepped outside. Still no one. The cars were there. Parked. Engines quiet. One had its door open. Another had headlights on, pointed toward the trees. I walked to the nearest car. The keys were in the ignition. The engine had just been turned off. I touched the hood. Still warm. I looked around, throat dry. Where is everyone? That thought hit harder than it should have. There was no reason why every person would vanish from a rest stop all at once. No reason at all. No reason at all. Unless something had taken them. I turned back toward my truck. That's when I saw it. A figure, just beyond the edge of the lot, standing at the tree line. At first, I thought it was a person, someone lost. But the more I stared, the more wrong it felt. It was too tall, thin, the limbs too long, its body too straight, like it didn't know how to hold itself in a human shape. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. Then it lifted one hand and beckoned. Every part of me screamed to run. I turned and bolted for the truck. My keys were in my hand before I knew it. I jumped into the cab, slammed the door, and jammed the key into the ignition. My hand shook. The engine roared to life. I looked back. The figure had stepped into the light. Its skin was pale, almost gray, stretched too tight. Its face had no expression, only two deep-set eyes and a mouth that opened too wide. It didn't walk like a person. It drifted, moved with precision and silence. Then I saw the others. They stepped out from the trees behind it. More figures, same shape, same smooth faces, same eyes. They didn't make a sound. They just stared, their heads tilted slightly, like they were curious, like they had found something worth studying. Me. I slammed the truck into gear and floored it. The tires screeched over the gravel, struggling for grip. For one terrible second, I thought I wasn't going to move, that something would reach in through the window before I could escape. But then the truck lurched forward, heavy and fast, the trailer dragging behind me like an anchor. In the rearview mirror, I saw them, figures stepping out into the lot. Pale, two long arms swaying. No hurry. They just watched as I tore down the exit ramp back toward the highway. The road ahead was black and empty. No headlights, no cars, just me and the roaring engine. I drove for what felt like hours, my foot locked against the pedal. I didn't stop until daylight started to edge over the horizon, casting the sky in gray. I finally pulled off at a diner 2 towns over. I sat in the cab for a long time before I could bring myself to go inside. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My eyes were dry and unfocused. Inside, people talked, laughed, ate breakfast, like the world was normal. I didn't join them. I sat at the corner booth, facing the door. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep for several nights after that. Later, when I was back home, I started searching. I needed to know I hadn't lost my mind. I started digging into disappearances, strange sightings, anything near Pinewood Rest Stop. It took weeks, but I found them. Forum posts, driver logs, rumors whispered by truckers who avoided that stretch of highway. People talked about that place, said it was cursed, said folks disappeared there. Some never came back. Others returned changed, quiet, pale, haunted. There were no official reports, of course. No news stories. Just whispers. Always the same detail. A figure at the edge of the woods, beckoning. I haven't taken that route since. I don't drive at night anymore unless I absolutely have to. I keep the doors locked. The cab's sealed. I don't stop at unfamiliar places. Not for gas. Not for rest. And if I ever see a rest stop appear suddenly out of the dark, or I wasn't expecting one, I keep driving. I don't look back, because I know what I saw. I know what waits at Pinewood Rest Stop. I saw what it does when you hesitate. When you get out. When you wonder where everyone went. When you listen to curiosity more than fear. It watches. It waits. It chooses. And once it chooses you, I don't think it ever stops watching. If you're on a long, lonely road, and the silence feels too heavy, if the wind dies and you feel something shift in the air, check your mirrors. Look for shapes that don't belong. Shadows that move too smoothly. Faces that don't blink. And if someone beckons you from the trees, don't follow. Because once you do, you might never find your way back. My name is Maggie Chun, and I've spent the better part of a decade photographing the world's wild spaces. I've crossed jungles, waded through swamps, camped on cliffs and glaciers. Nature was my home, the camera my only companion. It had always been honest, unpredictable, yes, but honest. Even in the wildest moments, when lightning cracked over mountains or a bear crossed my trail, I never felt truly unsafe. I knew the rules. I respected them. But the forest didn't follow those rules this time. It started with a solo assignment. 2 weeks alone in the Olympic National Forest. The client wanted untouched beauty. Thick moss, giant ferns, towering trees lost in mist. I welcomed the solitude. It was exactly the kind of work I craved. Quiet, controlled, no city noise, no people. just me and the trees. The first few days were perfect. The air was damp and heavy with life. Every morning, the light broke through the canopy in soft ribbons. I set up camp near a stream, a little clearing with flat earth and a good view of the stars. I explored during the day, camera in hand, moving slowly, capturing details. The forest was a dream. Every log glowed green with moss. Every stone wore its own coat of lichen. Birds flitted between the branches like flashes of color. Then I found the first photograph. It was mine, but not mine. I had been reviewing shots from earlier that day, flipping through the digital screen on my camera when I noticed something. In one of the frames, there was a shape behind a tree. A figure, almost human, blurred just at the edge of the frame, half hidden by shadow. I zoomed in. Tall, thin, arms too long. Something was wrong with the limbs. They bent where they shouldn't. The head was tilted. I stared for a long time. Then I told myself it was nothing. A trick of the light. Maybe a shadow. I deleted it. The next day, I went back to the same spot. I set up a motion-triggered camera, the kind that captures wildlife automatically. I left it there and explored elsewhere. When I returned that evening and checked the memory card, my stomach dropped. Dozens of photos, all empty at first. Just the woods, a few birds. Then, frame by frame, something came into view. It was the same figure, but closer. Each photo showed it stepping forward, out from behind a tree, moving toward the camera. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, but impossibly thin, with limbs that seemed to stretch and contract as it moved. Its skin, where I could see it, was gray, almost translucent. Its head was smooth. Its face had no features, except for 2 dark eyes that reflected the flash like a predator's. In the final photo, it reached out. Long fingers blurred with motion, reaching toward the lens. I packed up and ran. Back at my campsite, I deleted the photos. Every one. Then I stayed up all night. Flashlight in one hand, knife in the other. Nothing came. At least, not that I saw. The next morning, I found my gear scattered. My pack dumped out. Food bag torn open. The rope I'd used to hang, it had been cut. Not frayed. Cut. Clean and sharp. On the ground beside my tent was a single footprint, too long, toes that ended in points. And lying next to it, my camera. The memory card was full. I reviewed the images slowly. My heart pounded harder with each one. They were photos of my tent. My face, asleep behind the mesh window, taken from different angles. Close, then closer. In every frame, the figure was there, watching, approaching. I hadn't heard it, hadn't felt it. It had stood over me while I slept. I should have packed up and left that morning. The moment I saw those photos, the moment I realized I wasn't alone, I should have run, but I didn't. I told myself I needed proof. I told myself I was too deep into the forest to turn back without completing the assignment. But the truth was simpler. I was obsessed. I wanted to understand what I had seen. I needed to capture it, clearly and cleanly. Maybe some part of me thought the camera would protect me, like a lens could make something real and manageable. That night, I set up every camera I had. Motion sensors, time-lapse, trail cams strung through the trees. I recorded audio, checked batteries twice, set up a perimeter of lanterns to carve out a small island of light. I sat inside my tent, holding the camera, watching the blinking lights from the sensors. I didn't sleep. Around 3 in the morning, the forest went silent. Every insect, every distant bird call, gone. Then came the footsteps. Not loud, just certain. They circled the camp. Not rushed, not hesitant, steady, knowing. I stared through the mesh window, breath caught in my throat. Something stood just beyond the ring of light, tall, still, watching. I blinked and it was gone. I didn't move. I didn't dare. I waited for dawn. When the sun finally broke over the trees, I stepped outside. My tent was untouched. The cameras were still there, but the memory cards were full. Every image burned itself into my brain as I flipped through them. There it was, standing at the edge of the camp, then closer, then at the very center among the lanterns, staring into the lens. Its face, still unreadable, somehow suggested awareness, a kind of focus, like it wasn't just posing, like it knew what the camera was. The final shot showed me, asleep inside the tent, and behind me, inside the tent, was another shape. I dropped the camera. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I left everything behind. Packed nothing. Took nothing. I walked out of the forest like a ghost, never stopping, never turning around. It took me a full day to reach the ranger station. They asked what happened. I told them I got spooked. A bear. Maybe. I didn't stay long. I didn't file a report. The camera I left behind was recovered days later. The memory card was blank. Every file gone. I never went back. I gave the magazine a fabricated excuse, said the weather ruined the shots. They were disappointed. I didn't care. Back in the city, surrounded by people, I tried to feel safe. But even now, sometimes I see it. Not directly, but in the periphery. A reflection that doesn't match. A face in a window that isn't mine. I don't take photos anymore. I can't, because something saw me through the lens. And I think when I clicked that shutter, something looked back. Something that noticed me, chose me, and it's still watching. So if you're ever deep in the woods and you feel like something's following you, don't reach for your camera. Don't try to document it. Don't try to prove it's real. Just leave. Because some things in the wild weren't meant to be captured. And once they notice you, they never forget. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for most of my life, I thought I understood who I was. My reflection never lied. The mirror showed what I expected. The same green eyes, same dark hair. The faint scar above my left eyebrow from a fall when I was a kid. My face was my own, unmistakable. But that changed on a Caribbean cruise. I'd finally taken time off work. 10 days aboard the Majestic Dream, a floating palace of restaurants, spas, and endless blue water. I was 32, burned out from endless software updates and missed deadlines. The cruise had seemed like a reward, something light and ordinary. It wasn't. For the first few days, everything was perfect. I laid in the sun, read trashy novels by the pool, drank fruit cocktails with too many umbrellas. I even met someone. A guy named Mike, traveling with a few friends. He had an easy laugh and a soft voice. We had dinner, played cards on the sun deck, and watched the stars from the railing. On the fourth night, I dressed up for the captain's dinner. It was the one time people actually put on real clothes. I wore a deep blue dress I had been saving for months. As I walked through the dining room, I caught my reflection in a wall of decorative mirrors. At least, I thought it was my reflection. But as I turned, the woman staring back didn't move. She smiled first, and then, slowly, she waved. It was my face, my exact face. Hair, eyes, scar. Every detail matched. But she wasn't me. She stood across the room, surrounded by other passengers, and she was smiling like she knew me. My stomach twisted. I blinked. When I looked again, she was gone. I barely ate that night. Mike kept asking if I was okay. I said I had a headache, but I couldn't stop scanning the room. Every face felt unfamiliar. I kept expecting to see her again, standing there with my face and someone else's expression. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, waiting for some rational thought to explain it away. A trick of light, a coincidence, some random woman who just happened to look like me. But it wasn't that. The next morning, I tried to find her. I searched every deck, every hallway. I looked through windows, wandered into lounges, peeked into cafes. No one. I began to wonder if I was imagining things. Maybe stress and isolation were playing tricks on me. Maybe I needed sleep. I didn't find her again until the 6th night. I was walking back to my cabin when I caught a glimpse of movement in the hallway mirror. I turned, and there she was. Just ahead, rounding a corner. Same face, same walk. I ran. The corridor stretched ahead like a tunnel. I rounded the same corner. Empty. Nothing. No doors, no exits. Just an empty stretch of hallway. The next few days became a blur. I wandered the ship, obsessively scanning crowds, searching every mirrored surface. I started avoiding sleep. I stopped going to meals. I ignored Mike's messages. I became a ghost floating among vacationers, hunting someone no one else could see. Passengers started whispering when I walked past. One even asked how I got back so quickly. He claimed he'd seen me in the spa just moments earlier. I hadn't left my room in hours. I knew what it meant. She was walking the ship in my place. On the 8th night, I saw her again. I was walking the upper deck, late, when the clouds opened and moonlight spread across the water. The ship was quiet. Most of the passengers were asleep, the deck nearly empty. That was when I noticed her. She was standing near the railing at the far end of the deck, looking out at the sea. I stopped. My chest felt hollow, as if my lungs had emptied and forgotten how to fill again. She didn't move. The breeze barely lifted her hair. I stepped closer. She turned to look at me. It was like facing a mirror, but the eyes were different. Too wide. The smile too sharp. She raised a hand and pointed to the far end of the ship. And then she walked away. Without thinking, I followed. She slipped down a staircase, through a maintenance corridor, and into a lower part of the ship I didn't recognize. No windows, no passengers, just steel walls and dull overhead lights. The kind of place tourists weren't supposed to find. She stayed just ahead of me. I turned one last corner and found myself in a narrow hallway. Dead end. Except it wasn't. The end of the hall shimmered like heat over asphalt. A distortion in the air. And through that shimmer, I saw something else. Another version of the ship. The same hallway, but different. Wrong. The lights flickered too fast. The walls pulsed. The air was too still. She stood just inside it. Her hand stretched out, inviting me forward. I felt it pull at me. A quiet voice without words. A promise. Not safety. Not peace. Just something more. More than I had. More than I was. For a moment, I stepped forward. But then I saw my reflection in the steel wall beside me. It flickered. Distorted. Her face shifted in the metal. Her features melting, stretching, reforming. Like the mask didn't quite fit. I stepped back, and the shimmer snapped shut. She vanished. The hallway was empty. I don't remember finding my way back to my cabin. I woke up the next morning fully dressed, lying on the bed, sunlight cutting through the curtains. The rest of the cruise passed in silence. I didn't see her again. Not directly. When we docked, I stepped off the ship and never looked back. I didn't say goodbye to Mike. I didn't explain anything to the staff. I just walked. Back home, everything should have felt normal. But it didn't. I still catch her sometimes. In windows. In mirrors. Not always clearly. Just a flash of something familiar that isn't quite right. A second too late. A blink too slow. A smile that holds too long. And sometimes, strangers think I'm someone else. They claim they saw me at places I've never been. I used to correct them. Now I don't. Because I'm not sure I'm the only version of me still walking this world. If you ever take a cruise and catch a reflection doing something you didn't, don't follow it. Don't listen to the pull. Because once you do, you may not come back. And someone else might take your place. My name is Jack, and I used to think there was no such thing as coincidence on the road. Every stop, Every detour, every chance encounter, it all led somewhere, even if you never understood where. I've driven across this country more times than I can count, and I've seen the kind of quiet weirdness that clings to the edges of the interstate. But none of that prepared me for what I stumbled into that night in Nevada. I'd been driving since sunrise, New York to Los Angeles, with a deadline too tight and a trailer full of expensive gear too sensitive to trust to freight companies. I took the job for the money. I told myself the long drive would be good for me. Space to think, breathe, reset. By the time I crossed into Nevada, the sun had long since dipped behind the hills, and the desert stretched out ahead of me like a black ocean. Miles of nothing. The radio had gone to static. The GPS lost signal. The only light came from the high beams and the faint purple glow of the moon. Then I saw it. A diner. The sign buzzed to life just as I crested a hill, flickering neon red against the dark, like it had been waiting for me. Mel's Diner, the sign said. All chrome and curved windows, a relic from the 50s, stranded in the sand. I hadn't eaten since that morning. I pulled in, parked under a dead street lamp, and stepped out. The night air was cool and dry. The smell of motor oil and dust hung in the air. Inside, the diner was bright, warm, crowded, oddly enough, for that time of night. Booths were full, the counter lined with truckers, tourists, locals, all talking in low voices, shifting in their seats, glancing at the clock. The waitress brought me a menu and poured me coffee. She looked tired, her uniform rumpled, her eyes heavy. Something was wrong. I couldn't say what it was at first. Everyone seemed too still, like they were waiting for something. The clock above the counter read 11:37. As I sat there staring at my half-eaten burger, an old trucker at the end of the counter turned, met my eyes, and said just 5 words. "Whatever you do, don't stay." Then he stood up and walked out the door. No one else reacted. No one looked up. But I could feel the tension crackling in the air, like the diner itself was holding its breath. I checked the time again. 11:41. The waitress walked past and paused, her hand trembling slightly as she refilled my cup. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You should go," she said. Now, I stood up. But the front door was gone. Where there had been an entrance, glass, chrome, and steel, there was now only wall. Same faded wallpaper, same baseboard trim. No seams, no hinges. Just smooth, unbroken surface. I blinked. It hadn't been there 10 seconds earlier. I was sure of it. The other diners were already gathering, forming a tight group near the center of the room. The clock ticked on. 11:47. The lights flickered once, then again. Someone whispered, "It's starting." I didn't know what they meant, but I followed them anyway. The group formed a rough circle in the center of the diner. No one spoke loudly. No one looked at the windows. The waitress handed me a salt shaker and a rusted piece of iron. I stared at them, confused, but she only said 2 words. "For protection." The clock above the counter ticked on. 11:58. I didn't understand what I was part of. It felt like a ritual, like some kind of grim routine these people had practiced again and again. They knew what was coming. I was the only outsider. When the clock struck midnight, the lights went out. Not just flickered, they died. The jukebox that had been playing soft doo-wop cut to static. The hum of electricity vanished. The desert silence outside pressed in like a weight. Then came the sounds. Soft at first, a dragging noise, a wet scrape, a whisper that didn't sound like words. Something moved outside the frosted windows, shapes pressed against the glass, darker than the night behind them. They writhed slowly, pressing their limbs, if they were limbs, against the surface. The others began to chant. I didn't know the words. It wasn't English. Maybe it wasn't any language at all. But it had rhythm, and it had power. They held their salt and iron close, whispering in unison. never breaking the circle. I looked up. One of the things was inside. It had come through the wall, not the door or window, just through. Its body shifted like smoke, but its limbs were too long, bending the wrong way. Its face had no eyes. Its mouth split its head from top to bottom. It moved silently. It hovered behind one of the men in the circle. He kept chanting, didn't turn, didn't move. The thing reached out. He dropped. No scream, no noise. Just dropped, his body crumpling inward like the air had been sucked out of him. The thing began to dissolve again, fading into the air like steam. The circle held. I clutched the salt in my hand until my knuckles went white. I said the words, even if I didn't know them. I said them because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. The air grew heavy, thicker, like it was turning solid. More things entered. They circled. They pressed against the walls of the diner, testing the group, searching for weakness. Once one of them brushed against me, and my vision went white with pain. My mouth filled with the taste of rust. My thoughts went somewhere dark, cold, and infinite. The others dragged me back into the circle. The chanting grew louder. The pressure increased. Then, suddenly, release. The lights snapped back on. The static vanished. The things were gone. The clock read 12:01. People staggered apart. One woman sobbed quietly. The waitress dropped the salt shaker and slumped against the counter. The man who had collapsed never moved again. No one spoke. I stepped outside into the desert morning light. The sun was rising. The parking lot was full. My truck sat where I had left it. The door was back, like it had never been gone. The waitress followed me out, pressed a folded paper into my hand. "If you ever come back," she said, "come back prepared." I opened it hours later, after I'd driven far from that place. It was a schedule, names, shifts, a quiet system, a rotation of those who knew, who stayed behind each night to hold the line. The diner wasn't a diner. It was a gate. And midnight was when the lock came undone. I still drive, but I never take that route. I never drive past midnight. And if I ever see a diner glowing in the desert when there shouldn't be one, I don't stop. Because now I understand what I walked into that night. And I know what waits if the door stays open too long. My name is Alex, and I've spent most of my adult life behind the wheel of a long-haul truck. I've driven every major route from coast to coast, crossed deserts, skirted mountains, cut through endless ribbons of farmland under every kind of sky this country has to offer. You learn to live with silence, with time, with the strange things you see out of the corner of your eye and forget by the next mile marker. But some things stay with you. It started on a night like any other. I was hauling electronics across the Northwest, heading west out of St. Louis, trying to make it to Portland by the end of the week. The deadline was tight, but I'd driven these roads before. I knew the rhythm. The sky was a deep, smothering black. There was no moon. The road ahead stretched into nothingness, broken only by the pale cones of my high beams. The dash clock glowed faintly, just past midnight. My eyes burned. I needed a break. Just 5 minutes to stand up, stretch, and splash some water on my face. That was when the sign appeared. A rest stop, 1 mile ahead. It wasn't marked on my usual route plan. I didn't remember passing it before, but I was tired. I told myself I must have missed it in the past, or maybe it was a newer addition. Either way, I was grateful. The rest stop came into view suddenly, lit like a small island in the dark. It looked old, functional. A squat concrete building with heavy glass doors, a handful of parking spaces, a few vending machines near the entrance. There was a truck lot off to the side. A few cars were already there, but I didn't see anyone. That detail didn't hit me right away. I pulled into the lot, parked, and stepped out. The gravel crunched under my boots. The air was cold, still. No insects, no wind. Just silence, thick and unnatural. The building lights flickered overhead as I walked to the entrance. Inside, the fluorescent bulbs buzzed softly. The space was empty. No staff. No travelers. Just row after row of vacant chairs and outdated vending machines humming softly. I made my way to the restroom. The mirror above the sink caught my face in a dull reflection. Skin pale, jaw tense, eyes bloodshot. I let the water run for a moment before splashing it over my face. Cold, sharp. It helped. Then, in the mirror, I saw it. Movement behind me. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. It was shaped like a person, but raw. I turned quickly. The room behind me was empty. The door was still open. The hallway was clear. I stood frozen, heart hammering harder than it should have. I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, stress, nothing more. But that moment in the mirror wouldn't leave me. When I stepped back into the main room, I noticed something else. A jacket sat draped over one of the chairs, like its owner had just stepped away. A phone rested on a nearby table. Its screen still lit, unlocked. And in the trash by the exit door, a paper coffee cup. Steam was still rising from it. That was when the air changed. The silence wasn't just silence anymore. It was pressure. I stepped outside, scanning the lot again. The cars were still there. One had its door open. Another had headlights glowing, angled toward the woods behind the building. No movement. No sound. And that was when I saw the tire tracks. Fresh ones, cutting away from one of the parking spots, ending abruptly at the edge of the pavement. Not turning. Not leading to a road. Just ending. As if the car had vanished into the night. And then I saw the figure, standing at the tree line, watching me. The figure stood completely still, half shrouded in the darkness beyond the rest stop's lights. I could see its shape clearly enough to know something was off. It was too tall, too thin. Its limbs hung awkwardly, like they didn't know where to rest. It didn't shift. It didn't sway. It only watched. And then it lifted one arm. It pointed at me. No, not pointed. It beckoned. I turned and ran. My boots pounded across the lot as I scrambled into the cab of my truck. I fumbled with the keys, hands slick with sweat. I finally got them in, twisted hard, and the engine roared to life. The headlights cut across the pavement and lit up the edge of the trees. There were more figures now, half a dozen at least. All the same height, all the same stillness, watching. I slammed the truck into gear and tore out of the rest stop. Gravel kicked up behind me. The trailer rocked. My hands gripped the wheel so tight I thought the bones might snap. I didn't look in the mirrors. Not until I had put at least a dozen miles between me and that place. When I finally glanced back, the highway was empty. Nothing behind me but the long black road and the soft red glow of taillights in the dark. But the image of those figures stayed burned into my eyes. I didn't stop again until the sun was well above the horizon. At a truck-friendly gas station 2 states away, I sat in my cab with the engine off and tried to convince myself I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Sleep deprivation, too much caffeine, my mind playing tricks, but none of that explained the coffee, the jacket, the tire tracks that ended in gravel, the phones, or the silence. Back home, I did what I could to forget, but it followed me. I dreamed of those figures, standing still, watching, always at the edge of vision, always waiting. I eventually started asking quiet questions, posting anonymously on trucker forums, asking if anyone had ever seen a rest stop like the one I described. I didn't get many responses, but the ones I did chilled me to the bone. One said he'd stopped at a rest stop in Oregon that wasn't there on any map. He saw a woman standing in the woods. He never slept again without every window in his house covered. Another said he'd picked up a hitchhiker near a rest stop, just like mine, only to watch her dissolve into mist before they left the county. A third claimed He went in for coffee, found the place empty. When he left, 3 hours had passed and he couldn't remember any of them. All the stories ended the same way. They never went back, and they never drive after midnight anymore. I haven't stopped at a rest stop since. I plan my routes differently now. I drive only in daylight. I avoid exits I don't recognize. And if a rest stop appears that shouldn't be there, I keep moving. Because now I know there are places out there, tucked into the cracks of reality, waiting for someone to step in. Maybe they feed on attention. Maybe they collect the ones who stop and wonder. Maybe they're just patient. But they're there, waiting. And if you stop, if you follow that beckoning hand, you might never find your way back. So if you're driving a lonely highway late at night and you see a rest stop glowing ahead, think twice before you pull in. Look closely at the mirrors. Listen to the silence. And whatever you do, if the coffee cup is still warm, get back in your truck and drive. My name is Mark, and I used to think that fear was something you could reason with. Something that faded when the lights came on or the door was locked. I used to think the things that scared you when you were a kid, the shadows in the hall, the feeling that something was watching, were just tricks of the brain. But now I know better, because something watched me, and it waited, and it never blinked. It started the night I stayed home alone. My girlfriend was out of town on a work trip, and I had the house to myself for the weekend. We lived on the edge of a wooded area, about 10 minutes from the nearest neighbor. Quiet, secluded, peaceful. That was the word the real estate agent had used when we bought it. I used to believe that. Friday night, I ordered pizza and settled in for a quiet evening. I watched a movie, half-scrolled my phone, and by 11 I was brushing my teeth, ready to call it early. The wind had picked up outside. I could hear it moving through the trees beyond the backyard. It wasn't eerie exactly, just cold and fast, pushing against the windows like it was in a hurry to get somewhere else. Our bedroom faced the woods. From the bed, if the blinds were open, you could see the tree line. Tall black shapes crowded close together, swaying gently like they were whispering secrets to each other. I left the blinds shut, but sometime around 2 in the morning, I woke up. There was no sound, just stillness and cold. The room was cold, like something had opened a door. But when I sat up and looked, nothing was out of place. The bedroom door was still closed, the window still latched. I told myself it was the furnace. Maybe the thermostat had reset. Maybe I was imagining the chill. But I couldn't fall back asleep. I got up, walked into the hallway, and checked the thermostat. It was set to normal. The furnace was running. Back in the bedroom, I paused. The blinds were open, just a few inches, but I hadn't opened them. I was sure of it. I stared at the gap, heart suddenly louder than it should have been, blood pounding behind my ears. I took a step closer. The woods stared back. And for a second, just 1 second, I saw something at the edge of the trees. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a deer or a raccoon. It stood upright, tall, thin, still. I stepped back, fast. I shut the blinds completely, pulled them tight. I stood there in the dark, not moving, barely breathing, listening. But I didn't hear anything. Eventually, I got back into bed. I told myself I was imagining things, that what I'd seen was a trick of the shadows, a tree, a reflection, something harmless. I slept with the light on. The next morning felt normal again. The sun was out. The cold had lifted. I made coffee, opened the windows, and tried to laugh at myself. It was nothing. Just a late night and an overactive imagination. Maybe I'd watched one too many horror movies on an empty stomach. But when I stepped out back, I noticed something odd. Footprints in the dirt. Not boots. Not sneakers. Bare feet. They started near the tree line and ended directly beneath our bedroom window. No prints leading, just coming. I stood there for a long time. Then I went inside and locked every door and window in the house. That night, I left the blinds closed and the bedroom door open. I moved a chair in front of the window, not because I thought it would help, but because it made me feel like I was doing something. By midnight, I was still awake. I kept checking the clock. The room was quiet, but not comfortably so. It was the kind of silence that waits for something to happen. At 1:13 a.m., the light flickered. Only once. I sat up. The air felt colder again. And then I heard it. Not a knock, not a scrape. Breathing. Not my own. It was slow, shallow, like something trying not to be noticed. It came from behind the blinds, from the window. I didn't move. I sat there in the dark, staring at the blinds, and I knew without question, that someone was standing on the other side. Not an animal, not a prank, a person, or something that had learned to stand like one. And it was breathing, breathing. I waited. After a few minutes, the sound stopped. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I walked outside again. There were more footprints, closer this time, right up against the siding, as if it had stood with its face against the glass. I didn't call the police. What would I say? That something had stood at my window and breathed? That I had seen a shape in the trees? They'd check the yard, maybe write a report, and leave. It wouldn't stop what was coming. I stayed up again that night. I turned off every light and sat in the living room with the curtain pulled just enough to watch the backyard. The moon was gone. The trees swayed in the dark. Nothing moved until it did. At 3:04 a.m., a shape stepped out from between the trees. It didn't rush. It didn't stumble. It walked, slowly, deliberately, long arms hanging at its sides, head tilted. It stopped at the edge of the grass. Then it looked at me. I don't know how I knew. I couldn't see its eyes, but I knew it saw me, knew where I sat, knew I was watching. It raised one hand. Then it pointed, straight at me. I let the curtain fall. I waited for it to tap the glass, to try the door, to speak, but it didn't. And when the sun rose, it was gone again. That was last night. And now it's just past 2 in the morning. The air is cold again. The blinds are shut. And this time, I don't hear breathing. I hear scratching. Long, slow scratches, like something dragging nails across the window frame. It isn't in a hurry. It knows I'm awake. It's letting me know it hasn't gone. I still haven't called the police. Because I don't think this is something they can help with. Because whatever it is, it doesn't want to break in. It wants me to open the window. And every night it gets a little closer to convincing me. So if you ever move to the edge of a forest and your bedroom window faces the trees, do one thing. Never leave the blinds open. Because once something sees you, it doesn't forget. And eventually, it starts to wonder what your skin might feel like in its hands.